Tom Alvey,
Here.
Steve Beckley, Mike Richard, Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Stan Winery, okay, Steve Aquafresca,
Here.
Tom Gray, Mark Catlin, John Ely,
Here.
Al Vandenbrink,
Here, good morning, everyone.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Reby Hazard, Taylor Hawes.
Here.
And I do know Mr. Beckley's here. I see him on the screen. Madam President, you do have a quorum.
Boy, I'm
Thank you very much, Lori. Thank you. All right, everybody, we have a long agenda. Hopefully, this is the last board meeting that we will be doing by Zoom. I think we're all fully hoping that we will be in Glenwood Springs in July, one way or another. So with that, is there anything anybody wanted to add to the agenda? Yes. Andy.
Madam President, Mr. Fleming has an item that he'd like to add.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to add a new item to the public session of the General Counsel report at agenda item 4B, Romanet 4, add approval of stipulation in application of Northern Waters Municipal Subdistrict for change in point of diversion of the Windy Gap project.
Great. All righty, thank you. With that amendment,
And that would make,
That-
that would just move, sorry to interrupt, the
No, that's
the existing 4B4 would become 4B5.
sure. Perfect. Thank you. With that addition, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Monger is moved that we approve the modified agenda.
Winery second.
Alvey.
Winery second. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All righty. How about the consent agenda? Is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone wants to remove for discussion? Okay, is there anything on the consent agenda that requires amendment? Any minutes that require amendment? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would move to approve Aquafresca.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Second.
Aquafresca. Second by Kathy Chandler Henry. All right, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. All right. We're on to the general counsel's report. Mr. Fleming. General counsel's report.
Sorry, trying to get to the unmute button.
Yeah, I know.
I would make a recommendation that the board convene into executive session to discuss the items under your agenda 3A pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402 paren 4B and E.
Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So move Vandenbrink.
Okay, Vandenbrink, motion, second.
Second. Lee.
Thank you, John. All right, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. All right, we are going to go into executive.
We'll wait till we get some folks in from the public that have been in the waiting room, I think.
We are recording once again though, Peter, and I think we're moving everybody in.
Okay,
Everybody moved in, Peter.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being patient. Peter, do you want to do your conclusion from the executive session, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the executive session portion of today's River District meeting, the board discussed with council, provided guidance to staff and council on the items identified on agenda 3A. I do not believe that there was any contemplation of any action items coming out of the executive session.
Okay. Do you want to continue with your public report then?
Thank you. I will do that. Just a few items on the public report. Number one, I would call your attention to the discussion of the Waters of the United States update on your public report, which I think is on pages 2 to 3 of the public report. I'm not proposing to go into detail on that now, but we have been updating that over the decades now, it seems, as it continues to change. Jason termed it well when he drafted that portion of the report by saying, you know, WOTUS is the gift that keeps on giving. The thing that the board obviously will be interested in is whether or not the state legislation on a state dredge and fill program gets introduced or not. That will be taken up, I believe, under Zane's State Affairs report, and Jason will be present to discuss questions about that. But if there are any questions about other parts, I'd ask the board if they had any questions, and Jason to chime in if there's anything further on that update that we have there.
I've got one quick question, Jason, and we may not know, but I know that there's at least proposed legislation from CDPHE, Water Quality Control Division. Would that result in double permitting regulations? In other words, would it be a delegated program, or would it be a double permitting program where you need both a federal permit and a state permit?
I think it would largely depend on the project. You know, the CDPHE has said that the purpose of this program is to cover what they've termed gap waters, which are waters that would have been covered under the Clean Water Act, they believe, previously, that are not covered under the current act. So those would be waters of the state. So if you had a project that impacted waters of the US as well as waters of the state, I think you could run into a situation where you might have to have 2 permits.
Well, I would just say under the current language in the Water Quality Control Act, which is not currently being recommended to be revised, that if you can get a permit under federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act, there is no state permit required. And so CDP, I understand Jason's concerns, and President Whitmore, I understand your concerns, but that, at least currently in the draft legislation, that language in the Water Quality Control Act is not changing. And so if you're going through and you are a federal water, you know, you are under the current definition of waters of the US and you get a 404 permit, then you would not, under the state law, need a state permit as well. But as you know, I mean, this is a brand new regulatory program at the state. If it gets set up, those things have a way of growing. So is the concern there that eventually you may need a double permit? It's possible, but that is, at least, I just want to make sure we represent the CDPHE staff perspective on that, and our discussions with them. They've really been clear that that's not, they're not trying to change that portion of the law. So the default is the federal permit, except on these gap waters where there's currently no state permit process, and because they're no longer considered waters of the US under the current interpretation, that's where you would need that state permit.
Okay.
Jason, I don't know I'm
Stan,
contradicting
looks
you.
like Stan's got a question too.
Stan, if you're talking, you're muted.
I'm a little slow on being quick. Is that better? So if it's a gap project, so if I'm working on a head gate, right, I don't need a federal permit on an agricultural water right within 200 and some feet of the head gate, correct? So the state's going to make me get a dredge and fill permit for that. So if I'm rip wrapping or I'm digging or I'm on these ranch guys, now all of a sudden you have to have a CDHP permit for that. And I don't know how many people have went through this new CDHP process. And I'll give you a great example. A year ago, we were doing a project for the Colorado Division of Wildlife. So the owner, you have to set up 2 accounts. I set up an account and the owner of the property sets up an account, correct? And you have to use a driver's license. It's not, you fill out an application and you send it to them. It's hard to get it's easier in one way, but it's harder to do it in another way. So that's my question is that what this is geared for? And, or let's say you want to go somebody digging a lake, right? I don't need a permit to do that other than a state well permit. But what I do need, I mean, you can dredge and fill as long as you haul it to uplands. But under this rule, it looks like to me you would have to have it. But I'm more concerned on the agricultural head gate issues than I am anything else, because that should be exempt.
Well, if I can answer, Stan, the CDPHE has their initial version of their draft legislation did not carry with it the full agricultural exemption under there was a guidance issued back in 2007 that has been in place all the way through the Obama administration and the Trump administration. That guidance very clearly defined ditches and pipes and head gates as being included within the agricultural exemption. And that's why your experience is that you haven't had to get a 404 permit to do that work you're talking about. Now, I haven't seen the 200-foot rule, but in general, you if it's an agricultural ditch and the head gate's attached to that, and you're doing activities in that ditch, dredging, filling, piping, it was very by this guidance issued in 07, and it's a joint guidance by the Army Corps and the EPA. They acknowledged that was included within the ag exemption. We actually were successful in working with some of our friends in the state government as well as CDPHE to introduce that very same language and those definitions into the CDPHE's draft legislation. It's contained in that right now, that version that Zane sent to you. So under state waters, you'd actually be okay. However, under federal regulation back in July of last year, there was a new guidance issued that says that piping projects, and in certain circumstances, most in the West Slope, by the way, are, while they may have been exempt under 404, they're claiming that piping is now a change in use and therefore is recaptured, and now you have to get a 404 permit. So believe it or not, we're actually potentially seeing a switch where if it's a state water only and not a federal water, our ag exemption would continue and be honored under the federal law the new guidance that came out and the new interpretation. It's much more complex. I can tell you the staff has been meeting with federal and state officials on this. We have been trying to get through that. The Corps is trying to issue a regional general permit to cover these circumstances, and they're getting a lot of pressure from the Bureau and NRCS, our partners, and a lot of our ditch piping programs to create a permit that gets us out of this weird cycle that they've created. Nothing's been resolved yet, Stan. I suspect that we may have some piping projects and headgate replacement projects on the West Slope this spring that get caught up in that. We learned yesterday in talking to a Corps staffer that it is unlikely that regional general permit will be available before June of this year, and therefore, if folks are in there, we may run the risk of violating the Clean Water Act under the current federal guidance that was issued in July. And Jason, feel free to chime in on where I've been imprecise in my presentation on that.
No, I think that's accurate with what we heard yesterday in terms of the 2020 guidance. So we are continuing to work with some of our partners because both the NRCS and the Bureau of Reclamation, who do a significant number of piping projects, are also concerned with how this guidance is being interpreted for some of their projects. So we continue to be in close contact with them and in trying to come up with a workable solution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Peter, you want to move on?
Sure. I'm going to turn the next two items over to Jason. The West Divide stipulation in the application of the River District and the West Divide District for diligence, as well as the new agenda item on the Windy Gap.
Thanks, Peter. And the discussion on the West Divide topic is contained on page 6 of your report. As we discussed at the last board meeting, we have filed as a co-applicant with the West Divide Water Conservancy District on the remaining components of the West Divide project. Those are primarily located on the, we have jettisoned the pieces of that project that were on the Crystal River. So these are it's all primarily on the Colorado and the tributaries pretty much from Glenwood Springs on down. We had one objector in that case. They're a landowner with property in the footprint of the conditional water right for Dry Hollow Reservoir. As we discussed it also at the last meeting, we've had discussions with that objector and their attorney, and we have reached at least an agreement in concept in which we have agreed that any dry hollow reservoir that would be built there would not impact their property. Included a copy of that stipulation with your report. We are recommending, given the nature of that water right, we think that we wouldn't have any problems complying with that stipulation, or obviously we wouldn't be recommending it, but that would resolve that case. So we recommended the board authorize your legal counsel to execute the proposed stipulation with the Almonds to resolve their opposition in case number 20 CW 3056 in Water Division 5.
Okay, do we have a motion on Jason's recommendation?
Mrs. Alvey, move staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Chandler Henry. Kathleen Curry, Director Curry, it looked like you perhaps had a question. No. Okay.
No,
Any
ma'am, I was, nope.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? I'm not seeing any. So all those in favor of the motion to adopt staff recommendation and authorize council signature on the stipulation, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. All right, that's done. Jason?
Thank you very much. The next item was added to your agenda, and that deals with the water rights associated with Windy Gap. As the board is aware, the River District has been working with a number of other entities on the Windy Gap bypass, the Colorado Connectivity Channel. In fact, the board has its first partnership project funding has made a contribution to that project. We have also historically been a co-applicant with Northern and the municipal subdistrict on their decrees with regards to Windy Gap. In fact, we just got a decree entered which integrated the Windy Gap Firming Project IGA into those decrees and also recognized the Colorado Connectivity Channel. During that process, the municipal subdistrict realized that there was an error in the legal description with regards to the point of diversion for actually, I think it might have been the dam for Windy Gap in essence. And so there's a statute that allows you to go in and correct the erroneously decreed point of diversion. We have reviewed, the municipal subdistrict has provided us with a application as well as a proposed decree and ruling in that matter. They have not yet filed it yet, but would like for the River District and Grand County, much like we did with the Windy Gap Firming Project case, to enter into a stipulation prior to filing the application. So that stipulation would be entered and submitted to the court probably about the same time the application would be. So we're recommending that the board authorize its legal counsel to execute that stipulation. No case number available yet.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve staff recommendation on Windy Gap, the Windy Gap case?
I'd move to recommend staff recommendation.
Director Hawes moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Ely, thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion to authorize council signature on stipulation? Not seeing anybody. So all those in favor, aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed, nay. All right,
Thank you very much.
consider yourself authorized, Jason.
Thank you.
Is there anything else in the general counsel's public report today?
I didn't have anything else, Madam Chair, but I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board on matters in the public report.
I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand. Okay, then it appears that we're ready for lunch break. From now until noon, we will return at noon for the general manager's report. All right, we're in recess.
Thank you.
And we may pick up a couple people in the next minute or two.
Great, will do. Thank you very much, Madam President. Want to just say the general manager's report has quite a few tabs on it. Some of them I'm going to defer to the written report, and just if you have questions, ask you to ask them. Others, where their staff was involved in writing the memos and addressing the board, I have asked staff members to present on those issues today. I think it's really beneficial for both the staff and the board to interact. So would encourage you to ask lots of questions of staff members as they come up to talk about things. And I do want to just, as a matter of procedure, let you know that our staff has their cameras off when they're not speaking, primarily because we want all of you as board members to be at the top of your own screens when you're talking to each other, conducting a board meeting. They're not trying to do that to be rude. It's something we've asked them to do at management level, just because it allows you to interact as a board better. But when they're speaking, we do have them turn their cameras on. So just to let you know what we're doing there. Just real quickly, I want to touch on the drought contingency planning and the demand management world. I think probably the single biggest issue that is going to be raised at this meeting about drought contingency planning really has to do with incredibly horrible hydrology in the Colorado River Basin this year, followed by last year and the last 21 years really. So the key being that in the April 24-month study, it was clearly identified that there's a 10% low probability, I should say, of their Powell hitting 35-25 by 2022. So that critical level of protecting power inflow into Powell, it's predicted that about 10% chance that it will hit that. That's significant because one of the drought contingency planning documents identified that as the really critical level by which the Bureau and the Upper Colorado River Commission needed to start talking about how to reoperate the upper initial units. So that's and the Aspinall unit, and get ready to potentially deliver additional water downstream. As I mentioned in my memo, that the vast majority of that water would come from Flaming Gorge. There's not a lot of operational flexibility in either Navajo or the Aspinall unit these days for a variety of reasons. And so approximately 2 million acre feet of water may need to be moved down from Flaming Gorge into Powell in or before 2022 to preserve that critical level in Powell. That has all sorts of ramifications in terms of how and when and the timing, what that does to the river recreational, commercial recreation river, to the neighbors along the property there, the landowners. We're going to hear from some of them later today. But I just wanted the board to understand that that was a contingency plan that when signed in 2018, many people thought we wouldn't need for 8 or 10 years. And here we are just a couple of years later looking at that as a distinct possibility. So wanted to just draw your attention to that. The other, moving into the state level, the demand management framework was published by the CWCB. There's a link to it in your packet. It is a fairly complex, weedy document with quite a bit of process involved. I can tell you from our staff level, it clearly shows, as I think I said in the memo, quite a bit of work and effort by the CWCB staff. What it unfortunately, from our perspective, it doesn't give our water users or even our own agency a lot of substantive understanding where demand management is headed. And in our thoughts, a framework or a straw man or straw person document should really be testing and throwing out different regulations, market structure, framework, actual sideboards that would be tested at least in some pilot project or theory. That's not present in the current version of the framework, and so we just note that for the board. It is a, as I said, a weedy document that identifies potential threshold issues and elements of feasibility. But it's hard for me, at least, to read that, even though I live and eat and breathe water policy. It's hard to walk away with a lot of substance on it. And I just wondered if the board had comments or direction for me or other staff members in addressing that. We'd be happy to act on that. I'm not looking for a motion or anything, but just if there are comments or thoughts about what you'd like our staff to do in terms of engagement on that document.
Anyone have anything they want to offer up? Yes, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you, Madam President. Of course, we talked about this this study, this framework in executive session, so I won't go into great detail. But the release of this framework does not give me a great deal of optimism regarding the potential of demand management. And that's not new, but my sentiment on that is not really changing direction. I believe that the River District needs to stay engaged in whatever conversations are occurring around the state with demand management. However, I think given its limited potential, I would direct the River District to not be spending a lot of limited resources on this, a lot of limited dollars. I know that we were successful, of course, in getting some outside dollars to investigate this a little bit, and we should proceed with that to its end. But otherwise, I would not view any significant investments in demand management at this time as offering a lot of return for those investments, unless the climate changes on this. And of course, I mean the water community climate. But I'd like to see a change in the actual climate too. That remains to be seen. So thanks.
Director Hawes, it looks like you have a comment.
Yeah, actually some questions. First, Andy, I'm curious about how, I know you're going to talk about the stakeholder process that the River District is leading, but do you feel like that's going to result in, back to this issue of leadership and how we can be leaders in different aspects on the Western Slope and make sure that our interests are front and center. Is there going to be something coming out of the River District's process that will help maybe provide clarity to the state, answer some of these questions, deal with, just put some flesh on the bones of the framework that might be helpful, and not just helpful, but also help guide that discussion in a positive way?
And I appreciate that, Director Hawes. As is mentioned in the memo, Peter and I and Audrey are working closely with our group of approximately 20 stakeholders and our facilitator. And it is, this is where I have lots of empathy for the CWCB staff. It's a very weedy subject. It's a very difficult one for people to get their heads around, and arms around how one would conduct a program like this and why you should, if you do, what's fair, how does it disproportionately or not disproportionately impact certain industries or areas. We're working through those issues with our stakeholders, and our intent, and I think we're headed that way, is to have a report to both this board and then on to the CWCB with a direct recommendation on some of the structure that our stakeholders would like to see. And that was the idea behind our stakeholder group. We've got, agricultural and domestic water providers, some industrial water providers from throughout our entire area coming together. Unfortunately, Zoom is a really hard way to hold a stakeholder meeting. It's just hard to get people to talk. And as you might be aware, Peter and I like to talk a lot, so impact other people. But we really are trying to get some guidance and some thoughts about what our stakeholders would like to see in a market if it's going to be set up, and really come back to this board and to the CWCB with some concrete ideas and some concrete concepts that are recommended by that group. And so that is our hope, Director Hawes, and I think we're on track to do that. I will admit that the discussions at times get really theoretical and a bit challenging for everybody. It's just as I said, it's a major shift in the way I think people are looking at water consumption or conservation, and so it is a little challenging, but I think it's going well, and we hope to have that report to you hopefully at your July quarterly meeting. So.
Thanks. And maybe just one more follow-up. So are you hearing that at the May meeting of the CWCB, there's going to be kind of next steps laid out, or what are you hearing anything about kind of what they do with this framework now that it's out there, and are there tangible next steps coming?
Yeah, I think what we're aware of is that a number of those working groups have been reconvened, the CWCB working groups, not the Law and Policy Committee that you and myself and Peter sat on, but others that are reconvening to work through some of these threshold issues and feasibility issues and make recommendations back to the staff. I think that's one of the activities that they're engaging in. I do think that the staff is also working on some more concrete proposals with respect to rules and regulations, but we haven't seen any of those. I don't know where they are on that stage yet.
Okay, thanks.
Who else? Director Curry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. So, Andy, several times I've heard this come up. It's a big picture. This is kind of a big picture question. And it has to do with the River District's feelings about the adequacy of a 500,000 acre foot pool. And I wondered, and I think other people have this concern as well, does that really move the needle in terms of either preventing or delaying a compact compliance or non-compliance scenario? When would we communicate that to, or our views on that to the CWCB? Would that be when we communicate the stakeholder report to them, or how do you envision expressing your concerns about that?
Sure. Let me maybe provide a little background. I think that's a great question, Director Curry. It's our, I think you referred to them as our feelings. It's actually our data, our study, our modeling shows that a 500,000 acre foot pool does not actually provide sufficient protection or delay a compact curtailment under most hydrologic scenarios. And so you need a pool that's at least 1 million and potentially 2 million acre feet, a storage account, in order to really have a meaningful impact on avoiding the most negative impacts of a compact compliance event. And that's our risk study work that's been done for quite some time. A number of the phases touched on that. I haven't seen any data that disagrees with that, by the way. I just want to say that the studies we've seen from other groups have essentially confirmed that. Like many things in the Colorado River, the 500,000 acre foot pool is not rooted in data. It's rooted in political compromise. And the Upper Basin said, hey, we want this storage account that's free from equalization. We want to store our conserved water in it, in the crisp reservoirs, including Powell. And the Lower Basin said, we don't trust you. We don't think you're going to actually conserve any water. We think you're just going to play a shell game and you're going to move water that would have been in Powell anyway into your storage account. And so they, at a meeting of the 7 basin states, negotiated and came up with this 500,000 acre foot number, literally plucked from the sky, something that the Lower Basin said, fine, but we want to see if you can verify it and monitor it and really assure us that that water has been delivered. And I believe that if we could actually show that with the 500,000 acre foot pool, it's in the Lower Basin's interest for us to enlarge that pool. It's, and so it's not it shouldn't be that hard to enlarge it, but that the key is from our perspective, and let me say, Director Curry, you asked if when are we going to communicate that to the CWCB? I will tell you, I have communicated that to the CWCB personally, to their entire board, no less than 3 times in front of the board. We've communicated it in writing. Our stakeholder group with respect to this says, look, we might be willing to participate in a demand management stakeholder or demand management program, but we will only do so if it is calculated to be likely to make a difference, likely to help us achieve its end goal. So that's the message from our stakeholders is don't ask us to change and suffer and deal with this new market if in fact it's not going to make a difference. We might be willing to consider doing it if it's actually predictable based on science and data to make a difference. So that's what I expect the message that will come from our stakeholder group on that point, and really drive it home. And I think that's probably true with every water user. Why would you go through a painful change in your water use and perhaps forego your normal practices if in fact it's going to predictably lead to a compact non-compliance event or a curtailment? So I hope that answers your question on that.
Yes, Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. As you all know, here in Mesa County, we've been watching a Wall Street investment firm buying up agricultural properties, all with pre-compact water rights. I think it could be safely said that these actions probably would not have occurred if the state were not discussing the possibility of a demand management program. And if one particular major irrigation water provider was not also showing some willingness to entertain a demand management program, whatever it may look like. That really changes the equation in that our requirement that water users be compensated if they were to participate in a pay to fallow program, the equation has been changed as these Wall Street investors buy these properties, it becomes pretty clear that the compensation is not going to stay in the community. And of course, that's a real necessary part of a pay to fallow program in preventing the community from suffering economically. These investors have bought a significant amount of property. I'm told that just in recent weeks, they have purchased 2 more farm properties under the Grand Valley Water Users System. One of them is a very substantial agricultural property with a lot of shares. They are probably getting pretty close to obtaining a voting majority in that water provider's portfolio. They are already the single largest shareholder in that system. And it looks like at the rate that they continue to buy property, they could very well, very early on, become the majority shareholder. And we don't really know what actions they might take if they gain the majority vote in that organization. That's something to really keep in mind as we have discussions with the stakeholder group, as we assemble these findings for presentation. I think we really need to keep this trend in the forefront. If it were to gain traction and a program were in place and the money was leaving the area, it would not be exclusive to Mesa County. It would not be exclusive particularly to border counties. What would prevent hedge fund investors from buying up high country properties that also have good pre-compact water rights? Nobody would really be immune from this. And so I'll continue this part of the discussion tomorrow when we go over our policy updates, because now we have a new policy on water speculation that we can focus on. So thanks for listening.
Director Akafreska, I want to say I appreciate your concerns. I share those same concerns, as you might be aware. I would say that, you know, as you all might remember, there was quite a bit of publicity and news coverage on this very issue at the beginning of this calendar year. The positives that came out of that is that, you know, really across the board at the state and really throughout the state agencies and institutions that are dealing with it, as well as some of the other water providers in the state, there is a focused desire to create, if a program is going to be stood up, to have resolved that program be designed in a way to disincentivize investors. Now, there are lots of problems with equal protection and interstate commerce clause under the federal constitution that may come into play. It's going to require a very tricky design if that program is going to stand up in order and do it in a way that disincentivizes that kind of behavior that you're talking about. But that really, you know, has been an issue that's been identified very clearly by the state, by the CWCB, by the office, as well as our agency, as something that has to be addressed, or this program is really could cause significant harm. And you know, our economic impact study that we did with the Water Bank Work Group partners really demonstrated that. Again, had a conversation this morning with Attorney General Weiser about that very issue. So just it's front and center on our plate. So paying attention.
Thank you.
Anyone else on that matter? Okay, Andy, move on.
Great. If I can, I'm going to turn it over to the Colorado River Basin Hydrology. I'm going to turn it over to Dave Kanzer and Don Meyer. We'll call Dave Mr. Sunshine here. He can start bringing us really positive news about the hydrology He must be hiding from us all as we've so, Mr. Kanzer.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm afraid I don't have that rosy, sunny outlook, and going to tag team with Dawn today and try not to weigh you down with too much negative information, but the picture out there is not good, hot and dry. You're all living it. You all know it. I'll try not to belabor it. So Don has agreed to pull up and share his screen. And hopefully, Don, you're ready to do that. He helped prepare this PowerPoint, which really follows along with the memo. The memo paints that dire picture, kind of reinforces what Andy and you all were just talking about, really the motivation for doing something. We need to do something. Reclamations models indicate that we will fall through some significant thresholds, and I'll define and talk about those thresholds. And I'm not seeing it yet.
Yeah, you know, we're gonna have to ask Lori to make Don a co-host. Lori, if you could please do that. You actually took the host position back, Lori, so I'm not able to do that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the technical info or difficulties. But again, kudos to Don. I really appreciate Don's help putting this together, not only the PowerPoint, but the memo and the information on the hydrology. We'll start with the big picture, and then we'll drill down to the more local issues, and Don will take that. So I'll focus on the big river issues, again, without going too deep. You will see that, and this title slide should say Dave and Don. You forgot to add yourself there, Don. So as we get into it here, we're just going to look at the snow conditions, the soil conditions, which are both bad. So if we go to the next slide, and hopefully you can all see that. Again, this is one of those slides you see all the time. I just want to make sure your eye goes to the blue, the dark blue. And Don, I don't know if your pointer is available, but the dark blue is this year, 2021. And you can see we are tracking with 2018. And 2018 was the third driest inflow that Lake Powell has seen in the period of record. To compare that against some of the other sort of benchmarks, the purple is the median of 30 years. And obviously above that is wetter and below that is drier. So that's what the snowpack looked like above Lake Powell. Next slide. And combine that with the dry soils that, again, you see in the memo. This is a little different, but it looks very similar. We're looking at seasonal snow conditions. You can quickly get the idea without drilling down into the details that it's extremely dry, well below average in the areas in the 60s to 70s, in some places 80%. There's two numbers. One is the spring runoff with a little snowflake, and the other is the annual or water year projection. You can also see in gray some of the capacities of where we're at with storage, and we'll look at those a little bit more carefully in the next slides. So the soil moisture we know now is extremely critical to what we call efficiency of runoff. The drier the soils, the larger the soil moisture deficit that we need to fill before runoff can efficiently move from the snow sheds to the river. And so we're looking at the bottom 5 in a 40-year period. That represents essentially 2020. Okay, we've had, you know, not a horrendous winter, not a great one, but combine that with horrendous soils, and you have a very poor situation. So as we move on here, the water supply forecasts, which integrate those parameters, show reds and dark colors, somewhere between 30 and 70%, as we said, across the basin. And the other issue here is this is a widespread event. This is not a local watershed event where we could be saved like we had in past years by the Green River. The Green River is suffering just as bad, and essentially none of the main facilities in the basin are projected to fill. Next. And so when you look at that graphically, you can kind of look at the percent current live storage to give you a perspective of where we're at in the upper basin, that first column. And you can see, except for Flaming Gorge and Navajo, we're below 50%. We don't expect those to go up very much, unfortunately, maybe a small inflow associated with the runoff. But right now, these could be the highs, and everything may be heading down in terms of storage from here on out of this water year. Next slide. Again, this is just another way of looking at what we've talked about, but I just want to show you the peak occurred early and the runoff is occurring early. This is again above Lake Powell, and these slides are reclamation slides. I want to point that out. The other one that I like to look at, which is a little confusing, but it's a cumulative flow, and this lowest line is 2002. And if you can see where we're at in the dark, we are tracking 2002, which was the #1 driest year. So that's not a good thing. We are anticipating a little bend in the upward direction, somewhere coming up with associated with a peak flow, a small peak, but we want to get off the yellow line and get into the green, or the orange line, excuse me, and into the green. And this is the cumulative 7-day average. Okay, so if we move forward again, the news doesn't get any better. Just another way to look at some of the numbers. I want you to understand the difference between the the spring runoff on the left side and the annual projected runoff. The water year, and in this case, they're very similar because we don't have a very good spring runoff projected. And again, just looking at the percentage of average, it's pretty discouraging. Next slide. And this is another slide you have seen often, but it puts 2021 in perspective and introduces the concept of min, most, and max probable. So Reclamation has been doing some additional modeling and upgrading their tools. They are now running these 3 traces, the min, which is what we call a 90% exceedance, the most, which is a 50% exceedance, and the max, which is a 10% exceedance, meaning 10% is wetter. So if you look at those in comparison again to 2018, right now the minimum is less and the most probable is almost identical, just a little bit above. So that's in the context of the last 40 years or so. So if we move on, well, I want to talk a little bit about those thresholds. And this is, again, one of these plots you've probably come to know and hate, like I do, but it shows the thresholds and the tiers. On the left is Lake Powell, on the right is Lake Mead. And they make these projections every month, but the bottom line here is when we set the operational tiers, we do that essentially 6 months ahead of time, 6 to 12 months ahead of time. And so we have set this year's operation essentially last year, right? Last August. And at that time, we were projecting where the red line is, okay? And we operate in these tiers for Lake Powell. It's the upper elevation balancing tier. And in Lake Mead, it's called the ICS tier, where they can utilize, put water into intentionally created surplus or withdraw water from intentionally created surplus. So those things are governing this year's operation, and it's going to change. If we go to the next, just keep that in mind. So as we look at what we call the teacups, comparing Lake Powell to Lake Mead, these again are looking at the end of this year, end of 2021, where we're going to end up with an 8.23 release from Lake Powell down to Lake Mead. You can see Lake Powell falls and Lake Mead comes up a little bit. But the bad news is, we're still projected to be, unfortunately, 33% of active storage. We are approaching historic territory, okay? And I'll dig down a little bit deeper here, show you a similar graphic for Mead. And the bottom line here is the total system storage between Lakes Powell, Mead, and all the CRSP, that we're looking at 52% last year. This year, it has dropped to 44%. And we anticipate dropping another 4 million acre feet from system storage down to, I believe, 22 million acre feet of active capacity within the Colorado River storage. You'll see some high numbers here for Lake Mojave and Lake Havasu. These are essentially after bay and power generating facilities. There's not a lot of water, but they keep those generally full. So that's why that's higher for those. But the storage batteries of Powell and Mead, extremely troubling as of April 13th. Anything can change. We're hoping for a nice monsoonal season. It's not projected, but we're still hoping against hope, which is not the best strategy. So understood. We'll move on to the next one and just show you graphically what we're talking about before I hand it over to Dawn. This depicts in green, the most probable modeling run, the max probable in blue, and the min probable. And Andy was talking about this min probable. Everybody's talking about the min probable. For the first time ever, you can see where the arrow comes down. We will go below that 35.25. This is in 2022, projected with the minimum probable projection, right? That doesn't mean that's going to happen. But what that does is it makes us trigger that provision where we get together on a monthly basis to look at hydrology and to look at the modeling much more carefully. And again, triggers that every single month now they'll be doing these min, max probable runs for everybody to see and to understand and track when we may be pulling out that drought response operations agreement to move water down from the upper basin, from essentially Flaming Gorge, right? So Lake Mead tells a similar tale. This one, though, the other groundbreaking thing is breaking this 1075 mark. If you can show that, Dawn, that's the level 1 storage conditions. We haven't, and what they do actually, you can, according to the rules, break that elevation, but if you come back, which we've done in past years, when we've talked about the sweet spot by December, there's no foul called. However, this year, you can see all 3 traces come into that space below 1075, triggering a level 1 shortage. The level 1 shortage, there's a table that shows this, but essentially the CAP, the Central Arizona Project, could take up to 600,000 acre feet of less water than they're used to. So they typically take 1.6 million, unless they do some trading, that goes down to about 1 million into Central Arizona. So that's a really critical issue for them. My prediction is that we're going to see additional conservation this year in 21 to avoid that forced shortage. And we will see how aggressive their conservation measures would occur to keep them out of that level 1 shortage. So stay tuned on that. And I think at this point, Dawn, you are up next, if you can take it from here.
You bet. Can everybody hear me? Yep. So this next slide is the precipitation temperature forecast for 3 months out, May, June, and July. I think it's a half-month lead time. And just basically drier than average and warmer than average conditions anticipated climatologically through July. U.S. Drought Monitor continues to worsen. I think the memo states that 40% of the area in the map is extreme or moderate to extreme. So the SNOTEL statewide map here shows that the snowpack is statewide 77% of average, with the South Platte weighing in at 96% of average. So kind of a small bright spot in the statewide snowpack map. Arkansas, 85%. The Animas, San Juan, San Miguel, 63%, which is the lowest in the state. Colorado at 76% of average, and these numbers are only going to fall, it does appear, based on those the climate predictions. So this is a simple column graph showing the water supply forecast for various nodes and facilities in the Colorado River. On the right, you see Lake Powell. I believe they do a daily forecast, the Basin River Forecast Center, and that has been reduced to 36% of average. This graph shows 39%, but that was as of April 1. Plateau Creek, unfortunately, is the red-headed stepchild again, just like last year, coming in at less than 35%. Wolford, last year we did really well. This year, not so well. Less than 50% anticipated inflow into Wolford this year. And many of the other, almost all the other facilities that are represented here come in less than 70% of average. The Fraser stands out as at 80% of the average anticipated volume. So this is a graph of the last 4 months of flow conditions at Cameo, the Colorado River. You can see that we've been below average. Recently, we got a little help from Green Mountain Reservoir and from Mother Nature, although she's playing catty and it's staying fairly cool. Not a lot of snowpack building, but at least the snowpack is being maintained. But again, early runoff conditions are right around the corner. Probably Sunday we see a little warming. So this is a Wolford chart that shows operations. The dark brown is elevation, red on the right axis. You can see that we're pretty close to where we were last year, about 9.5 feet down from full pool. The flows are red on the left axis. The green being releases and the blue trace being inflow. So inflow is just starting to develop. We were at 70 CFS this morning and dropped down to 50 CFS due to the outlook in terms of inflow to Wolford for the next week. And this is a chart that came out of our operations plan that we sent to Bill McCormick, State Dam Safety Chief, and it shows us filling here. This is probably a little bit better than we're going to see in terms of inflow, and this is an April 1, based on an April 1 projection. The call has not come off yet and is not likely to come off for through the end of the month, so we won't likely start to store until May, perhaps first week in May. We'll see how that goes, but the Cameo calls on. SHOP has been in play at Shoshone. So this represents a 30,000 acre foot substitution year. So again, substitution is where Denver and Colorado Springs holds back water above Green Mountain, stores it out of priority, and that water is released from Williams Fork and Wolford to supplement Green Mountain releases to the main stem Colorado. So here we are at, again, the green, red on the left is releases, and we are up to 200 CFS release starting in July. So really drawing the reservoir down. Again, this is based on 30,000 acre substitution year, which requires 19,000 acre feet comes out of Wolford. We wind up under this scenario, assuming we fill, which I'm not promising. But if we do fill and this substitution scenario comes about, then we'll be about 23 feet down from full. And Just a side note, Bill McCormick did send a letter which he indicated agreement with this operation of filling, and really based on our efforts to date in terms of fulfilling recommendations that came out of the dam safety report. Maybell, okay, shifting up to the Yampa, Maybell gauge is well below average. Again, you see a little bump late March, early April, but really the runoff hasn't started in earnest, but well below average. Elkhead Reservoir, today we went up from 5 CFS released to 50 CFS. We had some inflow that was near 100 CFS for about a week. So the reservoir filled again. The dark brown red on the right is elevation. So we're currently about 8 feet down from full. So we'll begin to ramp up releases and try to maintain some space so that we can capture perhaps a peak, one of the initial peaks, and try to mitigate downstream erosion if we can. Shifting to the Gunnison River, again, same old story. Flows are well below average. I understand that the Aspinall unit has been operating in sort of a drought mode. Maybe D can weigh in on those operations, but well below average. Again, the runoff has been delayed due to this condition of cooler, but not necessarily snowpack building conditions. And again, another graph that shows the below average flows at Grand Junction on the Gunnison. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Maybe DK can be available as well.
Well, thank you, Don and DK. Oh, wait, actually, Taylor has a question. I was going to say, I think we got board speechless over that depressing news. So,
yeah, it's easy to be speechless. First of all, I want to say wherever DK is, I wish I was there. It seems tropical and warm. So, you know, all these conversations that we've been having this morning blend together, and this, I just want to note how many times DK said groundbreaking, historic. Unfortunately, this is more of a new normal. I mean, 2018 was similar. And so we're building bad years on bad years. And I just, while I very much respect Director Acquafresco's concerns about the demand management program, I think we all have concerns. But on the other hand, it just seems like status quo is not going to be an option at some point. So, you know, the more we can be doing to develop any kind of program, any kind of solutions that will help soften the blow, I think is in our interest as a state, as the West Slope, as water users, because if there's anything I think water managers want is certainty, and obviously hydrology is out of our control. So whatever we can be doing to create the solutions that will help mitigate this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I think is where we need to be spending our energy and focus. This is really concerning. And if you have another year like this next year, it's hard to really imagine how bad it might get.
Director Vandenbrink.
Thank you. I have more of a comment to add than anything else. And thanks, folks, for sharing this, because it unfortunately is dismal. But the White River, I know it kind of gets absorbed by the Yampa. But as we're watching the White River flows this year, we are well below 2002. And we are on track for 1977 type low flow numbers here within the White River. And when you factor in the soil depletions that are there, you have a large community here that is extremely nervous because our savings account is getting used up. And our savings account is also being challenged by going ahead and looking to idle up more agriculture, which sustains us. We're alluvial system over here in direct flows in the river. So I know, I wish I could say we're planning for something here, but the best planning we got is, we'll talk about that tomorrow, but we're just kind of holding our breath, because we're about 20%, 15% lower than what right now in water from 2002. But in 2002, the unique part with that is you had a couple of years prior to that to where you had some higher or average hydrology to maintain your groundwater and soil. That's not the case right now. We were challenged and said that a back-to-back drought ain't going to happen. But guess what? We've got about 4 back-to-back droughts that folks said aren't going to happen, but the reality is here. So whatever you want to call it, if this is the new norm, is it airification, is it cycle? I don't care. But the fears are real when you don't have another source. So we're watching this. We don't know what we're going to do, but I thought it was really something to share with the group, recognizing that we are already, and we started tracking this. We do this all the time, but December was our first real light showing that we are considerably worse than 02. So just some food for thought. Thank you for letting me share.
Sure. Anyone else have a comment? Okay, so other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Well, we're going to turn to a little bit of mixed news, maybe. The bad part of this is that the Yampa River is experiencing the same low flows that the rest of the tributaries of the Colorado has been. And so in 2018 and again in 2020, we saw calls put on the river for the first time. The division engineer has requested a formal declaration of over appropriation. And you should have received our comments to that request that we sent out on Friday. We can understand why the division engineer is headed that way. I think there is lots of consternation in the local community about what it means, and some concern in the lower Yampa about the number of people who might have well permits that are permitted for one use, but not the actual uses that they're being applied to at the current time, and what's the implication there for those water users. We've had some conversations and then the correspondence with the state engineer and division engineer to see if we can't get some additional time to do some educational and outreach efforts up there, both with the groundwater users, but also to talk with the local Conservancy districts. The upper Yampa, on which Doug Monger sits, has significant capacity and has a functional augmentation plan that covers its area. There are all of 2 and part of 1 additional Conservancy district down in Moffat County area that do not have any institutional capacity or water reserves to operate an augmentation plan for groundwater users. We've offered and will be engaging in discussions with those organizations, as well as the county commissioners and Tom Gray up there in the coming weeks. So we're looking forward to that, to try to help walk them through that. We think it's likely the state engineer will postpone that declaration for some period of time. We don't know how long. You could tell by the tone of the Moffat County Commissioner's letter that we copied and referenced in our packet. They're really unhappy about what's going on up there. There's great concern. We are working with them and the state engineer's office to try to help our water using public up there understand and adapt to this future. And speaking of adaptation, we've been, as you recall, last year, this board authorized our staff to release water out of Elkhead to help take the call off the river in late August. We did that because we understood a number of local ranching families had been forced off their federal grazing permits early and had brought their cattle down to their valley property, and only to find out that the call had been placed and that they would not be able to get water to grow any kind of forage or even potentially water their cattle. We were with our partners up there, both the Tri-State and the Colorado Water Trust. We were successful, and I should say, I think Mother Nature helped us out a little bit in terms of the hydrology as well, getting the call taken off very quickly. This year, we're going to try to be a little more proactive. We've been looking at this issue again with Tri-State, the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, and we've engaged Wilson Water Group to do some modeling to help us understand where strategic releases of water from storage vessels can help alleviate the call and actually help the environment and the recreational use up there as well. How do we do that and make sure that we're not causing unintended consequences? There's, on a river like the main stem of the Colorado, where it's been administered for 100 years, it's what happens when you place a call in one place and when your augmentation plan works in a different. You understand the implications on the hydrology. In the Yampa, it's not that easy because they just haven't been dealing with that. And so we've got this study ongoing, which we did under the general manager's discretion. I think we offered to pay a total of $7,500 on that. The other partners are picking up the balance. But what we're also trying to do is get ready this year for a pilot project if in fact the hydrology stays as bad as it is, so that we can be ready at Elkhead, and I think Upper Yampa is looking and working with the Water Trust as well as we are, releasing water out of various reservoirs to see how we can assist the hydrology and keep these historic water users in priority, basically preventing a call. And the idea is let's help the community understand what the quantity of water that's needed during these really hot, dry years, how we can impact the river flows and again assist both the aquatic environment and the consumptive water users. We've talked a lot. I will tell you, Tom Gray is unfortunately feeling under the weather today, so he's not able to be here. He does extend his apologies. I've talked a lot with Tom about this, and you'll see and you may have already read in your packet, the Partnership Project Funding Program has a request of what may be an unusual request, but given how young the program is, I wanted you to see it. The idea being that our funds in the Partnership Project Funding Program would be used to pay our enterprise to release enterprise water up to 1,500 acre feet to help try to mitigate the compact call. So an entity called the Yampa River Fund is also likely to contribute money to the Water Trust to do that. They haven't made their final decision yet, at least not that I'm aware of, but there's a request there for about $90,000 to purchase stored water, both from Upper Yampa and from us to help do that. Other partners are looking at what they can do given their operational constraints on their own projects. But I look at this as an opportunity for our district to help the folks in the Yampa adjust to climate change, adjust to the changes that are happening, and see what it will take to mitigate that. It's an experiment. It's something that I think we're frankly serving our mission, which is to protect our water supply for our water users. The Yampa is a unique river in that it hasn't had that call on the river before. How do we help them? And the end goal could be a blanket augmentation plan that's operated in the area, or it could be something akin to a historic user pool that is funded by other sources and water is provided from storage vessels. It really is honestly an experiment to try to see if we can't help both the humans and the environment up there. Wanted to just get your take on that. We're going to be talking about the actual Partnership Project Funding Program participation under a different tab, but I wanted to at least outline this pilot project for you. So staying away from the funding mechanisms, just getting any questions or feedback you might have, I would appreciate it. I I do think it's important for our district to be involved and help with, for instance, discussions about augmentation programs and plans and how Conservancy districts up there might band together and whether there's room for us to help them with an IGA. And I'll tell you, as the manager of the River District, I want to be real clear. I do not want to run a retail water augmentation plan anywhere. And we don't do that in any other basin, and I don't want to start doing that in the lower Yampa. I've told that very clearly to the folks from the Yampa County and our Yampa directors, so that shouldn't come as any surprise. Now, I do work for you, so if you tell me that you want us to do that, we can change course. But I just I think we can help build capacity in local organizations to do that, and maybe even lease some water from our reservoir to fund that. But it shouldn't, in my mind, be the district running that retail augmentation program. With that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions or comments on this.
Director Bonger in particular, do you have any comments or thoughts?
So yeah, I got a whole bunch of them, Madam Chair. So I just want to be brief though too. So I appreciate Andy's presentation on this, and we're in the business of storing water and getting paid for water too. So, and I appreciate the concept that he came up with to be able to use some of our money out of our tax positive 7A to supplement our enterprise fund. So yeah, I mean, we're at the Yampa Basin. We're trying to figure out how the rest of the world has ran for the last 100 years or 20 years. And just so we're just start getting our toes wet and the rest. The upper Yampa, I mean, we've been in this, the division engineer's been administering the river above City of Steamboat Springs in an over allocated manner anyhow, and as well as the Elk River has been appropriated as over appropriated because of the in-stream flows for the in-stream flows. So we kind of know with the upper Yampa, and we developed augmentation plans out of Stagecoach Reservoir and Steamboat Lake to be able to specifically do this. And so I think this is a great thing. I guess I have like the number 4 water right on the Yampa, and I think that we need to figure out how we're going to get water and storage water on this thing. So I appreciate Andy's situation. We are in the business of storing water. I'm not sure that we need to be in the business, and I appreciate Andy's concept that we don't need to be in the retail aug plan. And so we're going to have a meeting with the Drought officials and the Moffett officials, as well as Andy's and Peter are coming to discuss the aug plan, because in the lower basin, because the fact is that the River District has been forthcoming and thoughtful into creating a wet water out there. So we have wet water to actually do something with. So that's a great thing. So, I think the postponing it has marginal negative effects. I think that sooner or later our basin needs to face reality as well. And I don't think I need to keep sharing. I personally don't like sharing my number 4 water right with more straws coming out of it as well. So I personal interest in there too. But I think we have the assets and we have the ability, and I think you guys bring professional ability for us to help understand that as we move Moffett County and the lower basin of Moffett County into that situation and help them through that. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quiet. Thank you.
I think I would just say that this discussion points out one more time the critical nature of storage and how critically important it is for us to have storage moving forward in order to be able to have this kind of flexibility to do these kinds of multi-use releases. So Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to turn, just keeping an eye on just how behind the time I am. We do have Tom Chart from the Fish and Wildlife Service on the call. He's scheduled to talk in about 6 minutes. I want to make sure we respect his time and then the speakers after him. So what I'm going to suggest is that we cover the next item and then turn it over to Mr. Chart. And then I believe we'll have a presentation following that from T. Wright Dickinson, and then we'll get back onto the general manager's report if that's okay with the board. But the next item, Mike Itel is going to talk about the East Troublesome Fire Recovery effort up in Greene County. Mike, take it away.
Good afternoon, President Whitmore, directors and staff. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Good. Back in January, I came to you with the East Troublesome Fire, kind of an update. As we all know, Colorado, we were talking about dry climate, et cetera. But the River District suffered a number of catastrophic fires within the River District boundaries. Grand County in particular had the East Troublesome Fire, which in one day went from blew up over 100,000 acres and became the state's second largest fire. It's also should not be forgotten that they also had another fire in the Williams Fork drainage. So Grand County is specifically hit pretty hard. The East Troublesome Fire has a lot of agricultural water rights, and it also, the East Troublesome Fire Complex covers Rocky Mountain National Park and the Three Lakes collection system. Northern and Grand County have become the sponsors for the NRCS's Emergency Watershed Protection Program. And they spent a lot of time this summer meeting and talking and evaluating the sites and what work can be done. They've outlined nearly 190 projects ranging from just simple mulching and seeding to hardening head gates, debris booms to protect from sediment and debris flows, things like that. Lots of modeling has been done. The NRCS was not sure how much funding they were going to be able to come up with originally, but between Grand County and Northern's projects, their damage survey reports came in right around 35 million in proposed work, which is a lot of money. It's the state's largest EWP program to date. And then most recently, the NRCS came up with the funding. They authorized the full amount, but they do not, or I guess they approved the full amount of funding, but has only authorized 12 million. And out of that 12 million, 10 million will go directly to projects and 2 million will be technical assistance for Grand County and Northern. I have to say Northern's taken a large role in spearheading this effort and helping Grand County significantly. It cannot be understated how much resources are going to go into this. Once that funding comes available, you have limited time to put it on the ground and actually complete these projects. The big thing right now, I think, for folks to understand is the federal process seems to be a little bit slow for some folks for establishing the timing and getting this money out and on the ground. And so with that, we're gonna prioritize projects based on the money available and what's the best need right now. And there's a lot of talk about seeding and mulching being the primary one, and debris booms. And the other thing that Northern is doing, which is quite interesting, is outside of the EWP program, they are proposing with the county to basically make seed available for free to folks, mulch and say straw bales, straw, anything to help prevent erosion. They're going to make sites up in the fire zones so people can either bring stuff to be mulched. They'll have mobile mulching on site, trying to make it as easy as possible for folks to reestablish vegetation on their property. It's going to be very, very impactful for any kind of soil erosion and sedimentation to get that vegetation back on the ground. With that, I think it's really just imperative that we move forward with them. Amy Moyer and I have met with Grand County to see how our partnership program can possibly fit into their need for matching funds. And that's the big thing here is 25% of the funds have to come from the sponsors. So we're starting to evaluate that and see where the River District can help out. They have multiple meetings weekly, daily almost. So it's pretty tough to follow, but stay on top of it. But the River District's there and we're helping Grand County as much as we can. They've hired locally SGM to help be their technical assistants on this. And so that'll be good to get things moving forward. But as you can see in the memo, it's a large project and it's going to have impacts on the Colorado River. And so anything we do up there is going to be helping the watershed restoration and the water quality in the Colorado River. So we want to protect that that resource as much as possible. And in the name of time, I think I'm not going to digress too much more. If there's any directors, Director Richard is not present, I don't see. But he lives in this area, and it's been pretty devastating, but it's going to take some time to heal. And, we're going to work with them and all the different agencies to see what we can do up there. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Does anyone have a question for Mike? All right.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. We'll get back to Mike on the next two agenda items here in a minute. We're going to skip over, with the president's permission, to the presentation on the recovery program by Tom Chart, who's the director of the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program. This is a program that our district has been involved in and supportive of since its inception in the 80s. We really do welcome Director Chart and look forward to hearing an update both on the fish recovery, the biological health of the fish populations, as well as kind of hopefully a summary or some insight into the post 2023 issues. As I think this board is aware, the program was authorized by statute with a sunset date of 2023, and so everybody involved in that, stakeholders from throughout the Upper Colorado Basin and the San Juan Basin, are trying to figure out how to keep this very successful program, how it moves forward in the future, and frankly, where the funding comes from. So with that, Director Chart, thank you for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for the invite, and appreciate the board's time too. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Are you folks seeing PowerPoint?
Yes, we are. We can see.
All right, great. Thanks again for your time today. And Andy, I appreciate the heads up you gave me, and I think I'll try to touch on those topics that you're talking about as well too. I wanted to review some of the basics of the recovery program as a primer for this discussion, but then really focus in on the ESA compliance side of the program and the recovery actions that we are doing day in and day out to provide that ESA compliance for water development that has occurred throughout the Upper Colorado River system here too. I'm going to summarize each of those program elements briefly with a review of the accomplishments, what I see as near-term challenges, and then post-2023 challenges as well. Like Andy was saying, the post-2023 issue is front and center here. The program was established in 1988 and implemented via a cooperative agreement signed by the Secretary of Interior and the 3 Upper Basin state governors and the administrator of Western Area Power. That cooperative agreement has been extended twice, and like Andy mentioned, currently set to expire in 2023. There's a lot of support from the program partners to continue this program and keep it moving towards our goals of recovery and ESA compliance. The challenge that we're facing right now, in a nutshell, is developing a new funding strategy. Historically, the lion's share of our program and the San Juan program as well have been funded with hydropower revenues from the Colorado River Basin Fund and Western Area Power. It signaled to us over the course of the last several years that those funds will not be available at the current funding levels. Therefore, we're trying to figure out a new funding strategy post-2020. So I'll dive into it here. On the left is a picture of Patrick Steele, science teacher at Palisade High School, where they developed over the course of the last year a demonstration fish hatchery at Palisade High School, growing razorback suckers. They've worked that into their high school curriculum, and they're actually stocking those fish out into the Colorado River, which has really turned out to be an incredibly great outreach tool in the Grand Valley. And then on the right, the sign of the times of a masked biologist holding an adult Colorado pike minnow collected on the Colorado River main stem. You folks know the lay of the land here. Our program, the Upper Basin program, is trying to recover 4 species of endangered fish. We'll talk about those a little bit. Focused on the Green River main stem and the tributaries being the Yampa River, the White River, and the Cheyenne, and then the Colorado River main stem as well. Major tributary being the Gunnison. We do have a sister program that is dealing with the same post-2023 issue, focused on the San Juan as a tributary to the Colorado, and its main tributary being the Animas River as well. And that program, structured very similar to what we were doing in the Upper Basin program that was established in 1992, is trying to assist in the recovery of razorback sucker and Colorado pike minnow. You can see the program's goal here is to recover those fish as water development proceeds in compliance with state and federal law and tribal responsibilities. And the Endangered Species Act, which came on board soon before this program was established. Pictured here is adult Colorado pike minnow collected on the White River not too long ago in Flaming Gorge Dam. Our partners are key to our success. Again, established in 1988, the partners being the 3 Upper Basin states, federal agencies of Reclamation, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, environmental interests, Nature Conservancy, and Western Resource Advocates share a seat at the table being a series of committees that I'll show to you here as well. Hydropower is represented by Western Area Power and CREDA, and then a variety of water users are represented with a single seat at the table represented by Tom Pitts. The fish from the top, Colorado pike minnow, humpback chub, razorback sucker, and bony tail, all extremely long-lived critters. 40 to 50 years old is not uncommon for any of these species, found only in the Colorado River system. Long life cycles. Colorado pike minnow females do not become reproductively mature until they're 8 or 10 years old. So long life cycles, long response times to the recovery actions that we're doing out there in the system, and in part explanation for why we are still at this 33 years later. This is the committee structure. The lower tier is the technical committees: biology, water acquisition and information, and education. Again, dealing with the best available science, they feed that up to the management committee that operates by consensus, processes that technical input, does the reality check, and helps us with the final allocation of funds on an annual basis, go out to our work plan. The implementation committee is chaired by our regional director, Noreen Walsh. That program, that committee gets together twice a year, was really involved early on in the program, and then becomes involved depending on the issues. And the implementation committee has been involved quite a bit in these post-2023 planning discussions as well. But again, all 10 partners are represented on every one of these committees, technical, management, and implementation. The ESA compliance, again, the program offsets depletion effects associated with water development, both historical to the program prior to 1988, and then new depletions really talk about depletions that have occurred since the inception of this program in 1988. You can see the lion's share of the water development obviously occurred before our program was in place, but it is providing ESA compliance. If we tally up the number of projects in the first column to the left there, 2,186 projects. On the lower right-hand corner, depleting on average about 2.8 million acre feet throughout the 3 Upper Basin states there as well. So a lot is riding on a successful program, not only from our interest in providing a healthy ecosystem out there that contributes to the recovery of these endangered fish, but to be able to pass the straight face test with the Fish and Wildlife Service, that this program is making sufficient progress and therefore is providing the ESA compliance for this water development. I would say through time, there's been a lot of trust that we have developed, and the water development community has really stepped up to the plate. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about that as it relates to contributing to the recovery of these endangered fish. So what we do day in and day out as it relates to assisting in the recovery of the fish themselves really gets binned up into what we call these recovery program elements. Habitat and flow management, habitat development, managing non-native fish, the invasive species that we're trying to control, the biggest threat really to the program right now. We do stock a couple of the endangered fish and try to repatriate them to the river. And then central to this is a strong commitment to monitoring the populations to determine how they are responding to these management actions and how we are progressing towards the recovery criteria that the service wrote in 2002 that describes downlisting and delisting for these species as well. And I'll be able to touch on and provide you guys with some good news that we are pursuing downlisting humpback chub and razorback sucker right now. And that's a significant accomplishment that I think we all got to take a moment to reflect on and take credit for too. The program's been at it for a long period of time, but those changes in reclassification and listing status are really key and important. So the way I'm going to proceed from here is take a brief look at what each of these program elements means and then try to summarize it into accomplishments, near-term challenges, post-2023 challenges. Starting with in-stream flow management, you folks are intimately involved with what we are doing in the state of Colorado, obviously on the Yampa River in Colorado, myriad of contributors as it relates to trying to meet our flow recommendations in the 15-mile reach on the Colorado River. And Andy was just reviewing some of the cooperation and collaboration we saw on the Yampa River over the last irrigation season in 2020. A lot of cooperation from the Bureau of Reclamation trying to implement our flow recommendations on the Green River as determined by operations at Flaming Gorge. We also get together with groups and manage flows on the Duchesne River. Reoperation of the Aspinall unit came online to meet flow recommendations for the endangered fish there as well. And a shout out to Reclamation's operations at Navajo and how it assists in the recovery by providing habitat for endangered fish in the San Juan system too. So flow management is really across the board here. This is just a graphic that our in-stream flow coordinator put together, Don Anderson, working with folks in the district, Don Meyer and others. But this is base flow conditions on the Yampa River as measured at the Maybell gauge. Last summer, the blue line is what we realized, the green line is where we would have been without cooperation and collaboration. The program used its 5,000 acre foot pool. We also leased and collaborated with the Colorado Water Trust to purchase another 1,500 acre feet out of the short-term pool in Elkhead last year. And then additional collaboration from the district and CPW that led to this propping up of flows through the irrigation season on the Yampa River. We were able to keep flows above the minimum of 93 CFS, our minimum target, for most of the days, and flirted with a flow target of 135 CFS this last year as well. But again, we are realizing real changes to the flows out there through this collaboration that we're seeing in the Yampa River drainage and then certainly on the Colorado River main stem. The graph in the upper left-hand corner recognized the blue hydrograph where we would have been and how we were able to augment that through cross or coordinated reservoir operations to augment the spring peak. There was about 20,000 acre feet that were contributed voluntarily to augment that spring peak last year. Much appreciated, and you can see the effect it had on the Palisade gauge. Most of that water came from Green Mountain Reservoir, but a significant contribution from the Wolford as well. And then the issue that we deal with is main stem 15-mile reach flows through the summertime through the irrigation period. And again, similar kind of presentation here with the blue line indicating what we were able to realize, the green hydrograph indicating where we would have been without collaboration and contributions of about 40,000 acre feet from a variety of upstream sources to prop up flows in the 15-mile reach. The dashed line of 810 is what the service recommends in these dry year categories. We've come to realize that that's a really high bar to manage for. Maintaining flows between 300 and 400 CFS really does serve to keep the aquatic biota alive in the 15-mile reach, and therefore represents a significant accomplishment that we saw last year. We're going to be facing another tough year in 2021, but similar hydrographs we've been able to establish over the course of the last decade. And just a quick moment, Don put together this shout out. John Courier working with Kristen Mosley, freeing up that XTO water out of Rudai Reservoir that really contributed to our 4 out of 5 pool, but 5,000 acre feet that we were able to use. Water Conservation Board's continuing work with Ute Water Conservancy, and great contributions, again, nearly 12,000 acre feet that contributed to that better looking hydrograph last year in the 15-mile reach. The district, obviously, in Colorado Water Trust. So this is key, what's going on out there on the landscape, and this collaboration has been phenomenal. And again, I think is really indicative of the trust that we've been able to establish through the years. So as I close out in-stream flow management, just again, 30,000 foot level, I'm going to have a summary slide, and I'll do this for the other program elements as well. On the left is what I consider the accomplishments, the middle column, near-term challenges, and as you can see, post-2023 challenges on the right. I've binned this up into a couple of major activities under in-stream flows. The first step in identifying managing flows is to identify the flow needs, so flow recommendations, and we have those complete. Now, basically for every place in the basin, the most recent were the White River flow recommendations that were approved by the program partners in 2019. Near-term challenges is just continue this collaboration we're seeing in the 15-mile reach, complete a White River management plan, and then get back to the Yampa River at some point in the very near future to take another look at the best available information as it relates to base flow recommendations. Future challenges obviously will be climate change, and evaluate and revise these flow recommendations as needed through an adaptive management process. The programmatic biological opinions are important. Many programs, drainage-based, under the umbrella of the larger recovery program. You folks know that we've been able to complete those in the 15-mile reach, the Yampa River, and the Gunnison. We being the program working with the Fish and Wildlife Service that writes those programmatic biological opinions. Near-term challenge is to try to finish the programmatic biological opinion for the White River. This has been a long haul, but I'm thinking we may be able to get to that this year or early next. And then evaluate these and reinitiate consultation if necessary and determined necessary by the Fish and Wildlife Service. But the program reviews the programmatic biological opinions every other year as part of our sufficient progress review. So we're keeping tabs of those, and there's no indication that we would need to reinitiate at any point in the near future. And then securing these flows. As you all know, CWCB actually holds some in-stream flow rights down in the 15-mile reach. But as we've gone through time, there's a lot of other mechanisms that we're trying to look at to describe protection of flows that satisfies what the Fish and Wildlife Service will need to delist these fish at some point in the future, and recommend and recognize that we're going to continue to manage those flows to keep the fish off the list as well. The next program element is habitat development, and it comes in a variety of forms. Floodplain renovation, mostly a Green River activity where we're installing water control structures to allow the river to enter into these floodplain habitats when we know there's larval razorbacks suckering the system. That's all occurring during the spring peaks. These floodplain habitats provide critically important nursery habitat for razorback suckers. So in addition to the water control structure, there's we implement devices to exclude predatory non-native fish from entering into those floodplain habitats as well. Irrigation and canal screens, I think you folks are familiar with these too, trying to reduce the entrainment of native endangered fish into the canals, primarily through the Grand Valley, but we've also done this over on the Green River side recently too. And then fish ladders across these low head diversion dams to provide fish access to upstream reaches and historical habitats. So from a habitat development perspective, in summary, the fish ladders, you can see the ones we've completed those. Near-term challenges, those are all complete. we've completed our punch list as it relates to fish passage. Post 2023 challenges will be maintaining these existing facilities and repair them as needed. The fish screens, again, our punch list is complete, including a project that we recently completed over on the Green River Canal and the lower portion of that drainage in Utah. If you look at post 2023 challenges as it relates to the fish screens, we know we're looking at some major repair work at GVIC. That was the first fish screen that we put in place as a program. We've learned a lot since that point in time. So that's going to be probably a fairly big project. Whether or not we can do it with existing capital funds, more likely this will be something that we would have to push into post 2023. But again, being prepared to repair and keep these facilities going in the long term. Floodplain renovations, you can see the sites that we've done on the Green River, one on the Colorado River main stem at the Matheson Preserve, working with TNC and Utah Division of Wildlife at the Matheson Preserve to reconnect that floodplain. On the Colorado is the first one that we've been able to do on that side of the basin. We've got another project, renovation at the Stirrup wetland, another Green River site. Post 2023, these are fairly intensive projects. We're going to have to keep our hands in them, keep them operating, and maintaining those structures that we build on those floodplains. But these contribute directly to the service's decision to pursue reclassification and downlisting of razorback suckers. When we look at what we're doing with the floodplain work and coupling that with important operations out of Flaming Gorge at the spring that are triggered with those larval razorback sucker presence in the main channel, has really come together and factored heavily into the service's decision. Consider reclassification of razorback sucker. And then irrigation efficiency, the work that we've done in the Grand Valley and OMID. We don't see another big irrigation efficiency project coming online, but again, keeping that going in the long term will be critically important to keep meet the needs of the water users, but keep some water in the main channel for the fish as well. Non-native fish management, again, big issue in the program right now. Probably 40 to 50 species, non-native species, have been introduced into the upper Colorado River system. We're focused on these top line invasive predators, northern pike, smallmouth bass, walleye. Northern pike and smallmouth bass have established spawning populations throughout the rivers, main channel rivers, occupied reaches by endangered fish as well. Walleye are not reproducing in the river as far as we can tell, but are escaping from some of the off-channel reservoirs and unfortunately working their way up from Lake Powell into the lower portions of the Colorado and Green River. You can see where these fish have come from. And this is indicative of the predatory effect. This is a large smallmouth bass that's just recently ingested a native sucker, about 2/3 its total length. So heavy bioenergetic predatory pressure from these non-native predators in the system. We really have a two-tiered strategy that we're dealing with to try to control these non-native fish in river. It's large-scale removal, a lot of brute force that we're throwing at it, trying to disrupt spawning congregations of northern pike and smallmouth bass. And then in the reservoirs themselves, we're trying to contain the invasive species in the reservoirs to provide a sport fishing opportunity, but then work towards replacing those with compatible species that if they do escape from the reservoirs, they don't have that legacy effect when they reach critical habitat. We are starting to see signs of success. On the Yampa River, dating back to 2004, when the smallmouth bass population really took off. What we're tracking here is adult population in Little Yampa Canyon, about a 24-mile reach, but really the epicenter of a smallmouth bass population in the Yampa River that is subsequently spread down through the Green and some of the other tributaries. But you can see the work that we're doing in the main channel, interagency work that we're doing out there to target smallmouth bass spawning populations, and then the containment devices that we put in at Elkhead Reservoir have really diminished the standing crop of smallmouth bass. And you can see the decline from over 2,000 fish throughout that 24-mile reach down to about a few hundred. non-native fish management. And I'll provide a PDF of this so that you guys can review this. I'll try to move through it quickly though. Binning this up again into in-river control activities and then in reservoir control. The accomplishments, we have built this interagency coordinated effort now trying to remove northern pike, smallmouth bass, and walleye throughout 600 miles of the Green and Colorado River systems, multiple times per year. Extremely costly program. Near-term challenges with the in-river stuff is try to deal with more systemic control measures if we can. For instance, going to Flaming Gorge Reservoir and requesting a flow spike to disadvantage smallmouth bass spawning in the river downstream of its confluence with the Yampa River. We are proposing and hope to be able to pull this off for the first time this year over in the Green River system. Post 2023, we're going to have to develop, a research component to really establish more systemic kind of control going forward. It's hard to believe that we'd be able to continue the level of mechanical removal we're doing out there on the river in a very long-term time frame. So it's get innovative, talk to people from other programs, other parts of the country or the world, help us to try to develop control strategies that have more of a lasting and efficient effect. In reservoir, the outlet screens at Highline are in place, Rifle Gap, Elkhead, Red Fleet. Starvation has a temporary fix, starvation in the Duchesne River, drainage of the Green River. Near-term challenges, we hope to have a spillway screen installed at Ridgeway Reservoir to contain smallmouth bass from reaching the Gunnison River. Later this year, starvation permanent fix would be probably in 2020. Post 2023, we have to get to Catamount Lake, northern pike population up there, and try to screen both outlet and spillway at that project, and then maintain these screens. Post 2023 will be an issue as well. Incentivized harvest, the district is involved with this directly at Wolford Mountain Reservoir, trying to encourage anglers to contribute to our non-native control efforts at Wolford, Green Mountain Reservoir as well. I think that this is going to be important to probably keep this post 2023 as much as a biological control mechanism, but also an important messaging tool where we can enlist the public to understand, take as many of these non-native fish as you possibly can out of these reservoirs. We're trying to manage for compatible species in the reservoirs and contribute to recovery of the native fish downstream. And then chemical renovation, never popular with the public. CPW has done it at a couple of places. Utah Division of Wildlife has done it at a couple of places. But I think we have to keep that in our toolbox too. Unfortunately, these fish move from reservoir to reservoir. We're continually dealing with that problem as well. Propagation, or our hatchery program, really is the states, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Utah Division of Wildlife working together to produce our stocking targets of 12,000 adult razorback sucker annually and 35,000 bony tail. Again, we're stocking them in the Green and Colorado River systems. A successful stocking program with razorback sucker. We're still working on improving survival of bony tail coming out of the hatchery. And again, Colorado pike minnow and humpback chub are self-sustaining. We have not stocked those species through the life of the program yet. Just one of the shots of the hatchery over in the Grand Valley. Propagation summary, accomplishments. You can see the program has built a national fish hatchery system, both in Utah at Randlet, and then down in the Grand Valley, a hatchery and a grow-out pond facility down there as well. We've expanded facilities for Utah Division of Wildlife's hatchery down along the banks of Lake Powell, where they raise bony tail for stocking in the upper basin. And we contribute funds to CPW's MUMA facility in the San Luis Valley. Near-term challenges are maintaining these facilities and meet the production goals for razorback sucker and bony tail. Post 2023, we're facing some potential needs to start producing humpback chub if we want to repatriate that species back into the lower portions of the Yampa River and Dinosaur National Monument. That's a population of humpback chub that we have lost throughout the life of the program. And it may be necessary for us to rescue Colorado pike minnow on the Green River side of the basin as well. We haven't determined that yet, but it may be an additional drain and demand on our hatchery program post 2023. Program element monitoring, again, really fundamental to an adaptive management strategy where you study your target populations to determine how well they're responding to the management actions that we're doing out there. So we have adult monitoring for Colorado pike minnow, where we gather information on razorback sucker as well. We do that for humpback chub in the canyon reaches where the humpback chub reside. And then early life stage monitoring too, that provides a lot of important information for things like spring operations at Flaming Gorge Dam. We know we have larvae, razorback sucker larvae in the system. We alert Bureau of Reclamation and they make the releases to connect those floodplain habitats. And then this is just a graphic of our database management to date. We are tracking tagged individuals, mostly that have come out of the hatchery, to the tune of about 1.25 million fish. In 2020, you can see that we had over 3 million detections of those fish, either hands-on through sampling out in the river or detections at tag antenna. Monitoring summary, you can see there's a lot of work that goes into monitoring when we're doing multi-pass mark recapture population estimates throughout 550 miles of the Green River and its tributaries. We're just wrapping up a population sampling rotation on the Colorado River as well. Humpback chub, similar kind of a program, not nearly as much geographic coverage because those critters are really focused in on living in the canyon habitats. Adult monitoring is expensive but necessary to determine again how these species are responding to management and how close we are getting to recovery. So this information provides critical information for the Fish and Wildlife Service to lean on when they propose downlisting humpback chub. Post 2023, I think we're going to need to continue this until we get to recovery, and then hopefully we can scale this back considerably in a post-recovery mode. Early life stage monitoring, without getting into details, the beauty of that is that it's really helping us with management actions and how we time our flow management, whether again it's spring operations on the Green River or base flow management throughout the basin. So a quick look at the status of the fish. Humpback chub, again, living in these canyons. We lost that one population up in Dinosaur National. We have 4 stable populations, and then in the upper basin, and then another population, strong population in Grand Canyon. This is just some population monitoring information from Desolation Canyon on the Green River side and Westwater Canyon. Stability over the relatively long term and some uptick in population in Westwater Canyon in our most recent population monitoring there. Again, backstopped the service's decision to propose downlisting this species, which is a real measure of success. For razorback sucker, this is a species that we're trying to repatriate to the system out of the hatchery. What we're looking at here is a trend in the population on the Colorado River main stem, similar to what's going on over on the Green River, where the population on the Green River side is closer to 30,000 adults now. Fish that we stocked out 17, 18 years ago are still swimming, reproducing, and we are starting to see successful recruitment all the way. These fish are starting to complete their life cycle again with those, particularly with those flow management tools that we are implementing at Flaming Gorge and that floodplain program. Status of Colorado pike minnow, large adult Colorado pike minnow collected in the Colorado River not too long ago. This is a long-term data set, population monitoring for the adult population in the Colorado River system dating back to 1992. Some ups, some downs. Currently, we're pretty low, but stability in the long term here. Fish and Wildlife Service is just wrapping up the next round of 3 population estimates, started in 2019, and again, they'll complete that in 2020. On the Green River side, the population is moving in the negative direction for a variety of reasons that we're trying to offset. The service has decided not to change the status of Colorado pike minnow, primarily for what we're seeing over on the Green River side of the basin. And then with bony tail, again, trying to repatriate this species back to the to the wild from the hatchery. And again, it is not as successful as the razorback sucker. We are starting to detect more survival of this species based on some of the stocking that we're doing in some of the floodplains on the Green River side of the basin. But again, no change proposed in listing status for bone. I'm not going to get into this slide. It'll be in your PDF version of this, but this really walks you through the process that the service needs to go through to get to that downlisting decision that will be published in the Federal Register. Post 2023 planning, I just have a couple more slides here. Again, historically, for both our program and the San Juan program, the lion's share of our funding has been coming from hydropower revenues. We know that that is going to be diminished. Bureau of Reclamation has actually signaled that they're going to prioritize the use of these funds for the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program. Therefore, our shortfall for hydropower revenues is even going to be shorter because they're going to continue to fund, or at least the proposal is continue to fund the GC DAMP at full levels with hydropower revenues. So the way we started this process, we worked with our program partner, San Juan program did too. We developed a menu of what you want your recovery program to look like based on confidence that we would achieve a recovery going forward. So it was a menu-based spreadsheet. We solicited input from all our partners. In the Upper Colorado River, we landed on a working post-2023 program annual funding estimate of $10.7 million. That represents 22% increase over where we are if we indexed out our current funding to fiscal year 24. San Juan identified 4.2 as the working estimate going forward, and that really represents just a continuation of their current funding indexed out to fiscal year 24. Most recently, the states put together a funding proposal. If we look at, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but the third column recommended for the Upper Colorado River program, the bottom line is $9.7 million. They are promoting an equitable share of these reduced hydropower revenues. That's contrary to where reclamation stands right now, with the lion's share of the rest of it being soaked up and covered by federal appropriations going forward. The states would continue their contributions according to the original agreement that we have established in 1988 that has indexed through the years to these levels and the amounts that they would contribute in fiscal year 24. And again, the Bureau of Reclamation proposal came out. It hasn't been shared with all the program partners, but it has been shared with the states. I did a side-by-side comparison here. The bottom line is the state's proposal really provides more detail, a better system, a better proposal for us as a program to look forward in terms of they provide a time frame, they request a specific amount of hydropower revenues going forward. They recognize the importance of cost share as it relates to matching some of those federal appropriations going forward as well. And they provide a kind of a unique and innovative way of looking at capital funding. Bureau of Reclamation proposal does not have nearly as much detail at this point in time, but it does provide another side of the another boundary to this decision space here too. And the bottom line being that there's quite a bit of distance between the state's proposals and Bureau of Rec, but now we have something on paper that we can hash out and hopefully come up with a strategy that we can identify in a report to Congress that will need to be submitted by September of 2022. That's all I had for you folks. Andy, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. That was really helpful and very informative presentation. I really appreciate it. Would ask if directors had questions. I would just say, Tom, if you can stop sharing your screen, then people can see each other a little easier, if you don't mind. But
thanks for that. Yeah.
Are there questions for Mr. Chart from any of the directors?
Yes, Director Vandenbrink.
Thanks. Tom, thank you for enlightening us again with that. Greatly appreciative. We've been working quite diligently together for the past 6 years. And it's good to hear you and see you back in front of the River District here, because we've got a lot of new faces. And frankly, I don't know if they're all well aware of how intricate and elaborate the system is set up to get a finalized PBO. But I noticed with your discussion there that there was a point that you kind of touched base on, but I think it's got more importance as to what the benefit from the recovery program has. And I'm wondering if you could kind of enlighten us or share a little bit more in greater detail about how do future depletions benefit the water users? Because that's a pretty big piece as to we've developed on the White River. That's a beneficial use. But can you explain, and I like to hear it as well, but how that really comes into play with the game as well, and really is a feather in the hat of the recovery program?
As it relates to the PBOs, Alden?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You know, the program is set up to, you know, provide the ESA compliance offset, and that's on a, you know, kind of a basin-wide perspective. But I think the beauty of these PBOs is that we can bring that basic construct to these drainages and start working more closely with specific local water users. And I think what it does is it provides them some more certainty. We can not only cover the historic depletions that have occurred in the Yampa River, the 15-mile reach, or over in the Gunnison River, but it does recognize this carve-out of future depletions that are streamlined, provided the fishing or the recovery program can come to the table with specific management actions in that drainage that offset and provide the Fish and Wildlife Service the coverage to look forward into the future and provide that certainty for water users. I personally think that the Fish and Wildlife Service benefits from the programmatic approach as well. I look at it everywhere we have a PBO in place. You know, we go to the roundtable discussions and how much it seems like the local water users respect and appreciate that. And I think it opens up conversations for, you know, if the service and the recovery program are willing to offset and provide some certainty from the development side of things. I think it opens up some real innovative discussions from the water user side as well. And they come up with ideas that we would never have thought of as it relates to flow management or helping us with the non-native fish control issue as well. So I really think it's a, you know, basically a win-win kind of a situation. And I know, Alden, you have been such a powerhouse, you know, working with us on the White River, and I just hope we can get that hammered out and completed on the White River soon too.
Well, I know we'll get it hammered out in the White River because I'm not retiring anytime soon. So, I'm here for the long haul because we started it 6 years ago, and we're going to get it done. But you made a comment earlier as well. I'd like to follow up on that of the stocking of Colorado pike minnow in the Green River. You know, I made that comment before, and as a fisheries guy, I guess I look at the Colorado pike minnow as being the top predator. So hearing that you're looking at adding that top predator, trying to shore up that fish's numbers, it takes a bigger predator to eat a smaller predator. And if we get a larger population of big pike minnow, I think you'll start seeing some changes with some of your remediation removal actions, like on the smallmouth bass, because they're definitely on the menu for a big pike minnow, I would think. So, and I know that was very strong for what I've done in fisheries in the past, was to get a larger predator in there to take care of some of those nuisance smaller ones. So I'm very, very encouraged to see that that's part of your proposal to be reviewed. So I'm glad to hear that. So thank you for joining us today, Tom.
Thank you so much, Alden. Appreciate it.
Director Aquafresca, it looks like you have a question.
Thank you. Well, I'm really happy that the River District has been a contributing partner to this program since its inception. Something I did that really increased my support for the recovery program is I spent a couple of separate days out on the river with fish shocking crews. I spent one day with Fish and Wildlife Service and one day with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I learned a great deal from the people that I worked with those days about the fish ecology in the river. And I know from our fish shocking, the river is full of introduced species, many of them detrimental predators to the endangered fish. We also did catch a considerable number of razorback suckers, all of them with hatchery tags in them. So we did not pick up a native razorback sucker, but they are also in there. And I would recommend to my fellow board members and staff that if you have an interest in this and you want to see the work going on firsthand on the river, I could share with you the folks to contact in those two respective agencies. Because I think having folks from the community come out and work with the recovery program really improves the awareness and the support for the program.
Great observation, and thank you so much for taking the time to get out there. I agree with you. It's an eye opener, but it really makes it all real, I think, for everyone to understand what it is we're doing out there.
Thank you very much. It's always good to get an update on the program. I think everybody's question is always, will this program ever be finished? Will we ever accomplish the goal, or is it an eternity? And, you know, perhaps there's some hope that that we will reach the goal of recovering these species.
I appreciate that too. I do think a concept that we are trying to promote and the partners are promoting as we go on is that getting to recovery is certainly the goal, but there is going to have to be sustained management at some level in the background to keep the fish off the list in the future too. Highly regulated system, there's this concept of conservation reliance, and I think that that's the way we're going to have to describe recovery from the Fish and Wildlife Services perspective, but just a lot of good conversation.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We really, really appreciate the presentation. We appreciate you taking your time to be with us.
Thank you.
And so we are going to go ahead and do our break now. Everybody, if you can keep it to 5 minutes, great, but definitely by 2:05, please be back, okay? Thanks. Thank you so much for being willing to speak with us today. Andy, did you have introductions on T-Wright?
If I can, I think, you know, T-Wright, I think, unfortunately, T-Wright, this may date your time on the board, but I don't believe there are any remaining board members from your era who are still on our board. But I welcome T-Wright. T-Wright contacted me and asked if he could have a little bit of time on our agenda to talk to the board about the operations, the impacts from the operations of the Flaming Gorge Reservoir and some impacts they're having on landowners and commercial recreational operations down below the reservoir. And I think with the intent that our staff spend some time looking at the issue with all the parties involved and try to help move that discussion along. But I want to turn it over to T-Wright. He has a few additional guests with him and want T-Wright to do the proper introductions. But T-Wright, just for all of you who may or may not know, is former Moffat County Commissioner, former River District Board member, as I mentioned, and is a true greenie, as I've heard him introduce himself before, and due to the fact that he actually lives and makes a living on the Green River. But T-Wright, let's turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Andy and Madam Chairman. I appreciate it. I think my best nickname is just Farmer, but I did very much appreciate the time I represented Moffat County on the River District Board. Along with me, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm T. Wright Dickinson. My family, we've ranched up here in northwest Colorado on the Green since 1885. I have with me today as well Representative Scott Chu from the state of Utah, representing the Uinta Basin, and Commissioner Jack Lytle, who represents Daggett County. We represent a loose-knit coalition of adversely affected interest communities, businesses, landowners that are adversely affected by the flows coming out of Flaming Gorge for principally two reasons, one of which was the recovery program that you just heard about from Tom Chard, and the other is Bureau policy that seeks to keep the reservoirs as full as they can with some rationale there, but I'll describe why that creates some conflicts. First of all, I members of the board and staff, I want you all to know my comments today are not in any way antagonistic, nor is what we seek to what you've just heard from Director Chart on the recovery program. From my time on the River District Board, I came to very much appreciate and fully support the recovery program, the goals of the recovery program, and all of us benefit from that. But there is a but in this, and that is there those on the green who are very much adversely impacted when so much of the Colorado Front Range and the Wasatch Range in Utah benefit by the diversion of water, and that we all do. And that is principally caused because, number one, and if I could get, Lori was going to share some photos, and if I could have her do that, I'd describe this as we walk forward in this. This is the bypass flows out of Flaming Gorge. The flows that Tom referenced earlier to meet the needs of the endangered fish releases are released out of Flaming Gorge Reservoir. The what we call Reach 1 is the Green River from Flaming Gorge Dam down to the confluence with the Yampa River. Reach 2 is from the Yampa River down to the Duchesne River, and then Reach 3 is from the Duchesne down to the confluence with the Colorado. Next slide, please, Lori. One more forward, I guess, Lori. I think I must have got them out of order. There. This is Reach 1 in Colorado. This is my farm. That pivot is walking on water because in 2006, the bank was clear and was 20 feet past the end of those piers. In that amount of time, we've had that much erosion on the Green River, and that's principally caused because we are releasing clean water out of a reservoir trying to recreate the floods of old without any sediment transfer, and so we're eroding banks in Reach 1. Lori, if you'd back up to the next slide, the slide we just looked at previously. That one there is a picture of the farms down by Jensen, Utah, in the neighborhood where Scott Chu is. When these floods that we do for fish entrainment in those ponds that Tom was talking about, we're pushing water through groundwater, elevating groundwater back up through the system, and it's causing salt and it's killing the fields on some of the fields along the Green River. We'd go to the last slide in that chain, Lori. Right there. This is a picture of the Ouray Highway going from going down to Ouray in the Uinta Basin. This was in 2011 when we had a high water event, and the highway is closed to single lane traffic. Now that is not totally caused because of the recovery program, but because of the elevation levels that we have to hit because of the recovery program, and the desire of Bureau Rec to keep the reservoirs as full as they can. We cannot adequately capture those wet year floods, and I'll bet what you all were told earlier. We clearly have had some very wet years, and we just had a Flaming Gorge working group meeting that showed that the modeling that how we run the reservoirs over, it historically understates those wet years, and we don't have enough storage capacity to capture those. And so the reservoir can't operate for its intended purposes the way we believe that it should. So our short version of the ask, guys, is that we're asking that the River District staff and boards work with Colorado and Utah stakeholders to find solutions to mitigate the adverse impacts caused by these Flaming Gorge flows that are released for the benefit of the fish through both the record of decision and this larval trigger study that Tom mentioned, as well as Bureau Reclamation policy. I'm going to ask Representative Scott Chu to tell you a little bit about the legislation that he passed in Utah and Utah's engagement in this process. Scott, if you will, please.
So good afternoon. I believe I've got my mic turned on. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. This resolution we brought about and created a lot of interest with the fact that we're releasing water that's not creating, not taking into consideration some of the benefits that what we had originally put the dam in for, one of which is creating carbon-free energy, electricity, when we use the bypass tubes. And we created a lot of interest to the fact that the damage that's being done is unintended, but it is definitely serious damage. And the fact that it happens and could be avoided, but we need to try to strike a balance and create the dialogue here of and come up with some solutions to help everything. And folks along the river would like to help with the recovery program. We need to do some investigating on how that could be done, and just try to get some full benefit out of the waters that are stored in the dam and have proper releases done out of it. And that's probably the main thing that created the interest. And of course, we're all concerned about water being released now with the drought situation we're facing, but we also recognize the fact that some years we have a little excess water. So that's kind of what brought it about. And the folks that live along the river, of course, we recognize the fact that there's some folks that benefit from it. The rafting community definitely does. But I think that, and we felt like in the legislature that there's a room for everybody to benefit from this, and let's try to come up with some solutions.
Thanks, Scott.
And the governor felt that same way. He signed the bill and said, yeah, let's take a good hard look at this. He signed the bill in February 25th, I believe was the date that he signed that.
Thanks, Scott. Jack, could you talk a little bit about the impact to the sports fishing community in Daggett?
Thank you, and appreciate being able to speak with you and for Wright bringing this forward, and Representative Chu, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Anybody give me a thumbs up? All right, thank you. And Kathy Chandler, I think we've been in lots of different meetings. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. We have been on lots of Zooms lately.
Yeah, no kidding. So for Daggett County, we have and you have it many places in Colorado, the sport fishery relying on that tailwater fishery. And one of the things, we've also developed a strong guide and outfitter business on the river. That's it's kind of a bucket list fly fishing place. One of the things that we're noticing and just want to be able to have in the conversation as it relates to economic impact, and being able to develop a little more security in terms of what that window looks like when the water comes up. We're not antagonistic at all. We're very supportive of the native fishery needs. But again, maybe we're unintended
Jack, I think your mic cutting out on you.
Trying to see my notes and speak at the same time.
There you
I
go.
apologize. Let me fix something real quick. Okay. The disruption with the flows, or the predictability, especially as it relates to the larval trigger, we're just trying to get everybody to the table in essence to say, okay, what are some other ways we can work on this so that the guiding outfitters can have a little more predictability of when those flows occur and to what extent. And that gets also back to what Wright spoke to in terms of the target level of the lake and whether or not there's a big enough hole in the lake in essence to accept those high flows to alleviate things like 2017, at least maybe mitigate what happened like in 2017 where they can handle the bigger events, or if we get a surprise spring and all of a sudden get a lot of moisture, if we can have a little bit more hole in the reservoir to hold it, thus making things better for the dependability of those scheduled high flows and when they would be, and help. They lose a lot of money right now when we have especially the unpredicted ones. And some of the data that we've been seeing is the predictability of the model tends to underestimate the big years and maybe overestimate the low years a little bit. If I said that correctly, Wright will correct me. So with that in mind, the idea of having a little more cushion in the lake for at least that degree of error that we historically has been associated with the Green River drainage, we feel like would be a good thing to look at.
Thanks, Jack. Andy, I want to be respectful of the board's time. We recognize that that the conservation plan that post 2023 that Tom talked about is a critical part in this deal. We can't bake in the impacts that are being caused and have a few hundred people being subsidized and a few 100 million people that benefit off of this program. We've spent upwards, Madam Chairman, I think over $700 million on this recovery program in both basins since its inception. Yeah. It's very good money spent. I heard the other day that the Klamath, the Columbia River Basin, those guys were going to be cut to 8% of their water allotments as a result of this year. So the program that Colorado's adopted, Utah, the Upper Basin states, is the right program, but it has unintended consequences that are not equitably being addressed. And as we move forward in this planning and budgeting process, we've got to have those resources and correct these inequities so that we don't perpetuate these into the future. And that's what we're asking the River District to help be a part of us finding the right solution. Thank you, and would be happy to entertain any questions if I can.
Right, let me just make sure I understand. So what you're asking is that the big Colorado River endangered species, the 4-fish project, that somehow money be budgeted into that program for these kinds of unintended consequences?
Well, the program has you all know in its authorizing legislation, it has a capital projects fund that monies could be budgeted in, just like Tom talked about fish screens and other things. There are mechanisms to do it. Budgeting is one, a willingness to recognize that there are adverse impacts and a willingness to find the right solutions. We all want to recover these fish. That's unequivocal. But how we've been going about it has caused some unintended adverse impacts, and we've got to find a better path. And first of all, we're asking the River District to help lend your leverage into that conversation because we know there are lots of very important votes and very important folks that depend upon the recovery program. I do as a producer, all of us do. At the same time, we can no longer continue to have these adverse impacts. So we've got to find a better mousetrap as we move forward into this 2023 conservation plan. And that's what we're asking you all to lend your support in helping us find the right solution.
All right. I think based on that, perhaps the best way forward for the board is to ask our general manager to work with our staff and come back with some ideas and recommendations at the July meeting. I don't think there's anything here that we can really make a decision on today.
No, and I'm not asking for that, Madam Chairman. I've also supplied, Lori has, or you all should have for your board packet, both the legislation that Utah passed as well as a letter of support that the Yampa Roundtable passed a couple of years ago. No one's endorsing any specific solution. What they're saying is we recognize there's impacts and we got to find a way to resolve this. And that's what we're asking for you all to participate in.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe the next step is for you and staff to look at this and then come back with possible options for assisting, whether that is financially or it is with some letters of support or some lobbying assistance or something. So
Right.
other board, yeah, go ahead.
If I may, I think there are a number of levels that the staff may be able to assist T-Wright and these folks with. What I'd really recommend is, if you remember a few years back, the board endorsed the concept of our staff running new projects through a staff analysis in terms of time and cost. And I'd like to kind of work with our staff to figure that out and bring it back to the board in July. I think that it's likely to not be all that expensive. It's more of a manpower issue and coordination issue from the district's perspective. I'm not saying the fix won't be expensive, but you know, try to bring our involvement in a very intentional way and weigh it against all the other priorities the district has. But bring that recommendation back to you in July or next quarterly meeting if that works. In the meantime, I can assign a staff member to work very closely with T-Wright to come up with what's needed, and in fact also touch base with Tom Chard and others just to make sure we understand the angles that are out there, so we can present this issue to the board. Is what I'd like to do. So.
Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you, and hi T-Wright, it's nice to see you. I just had a kind of a baseline hydrology question. Isn't Flaming Gorge going to be, the releases out of Flaming Gorge going to be key in terms of supplementing storage levels at Lake Powell, and will that be taken into account, at least in your mind, T-Wright or Andy, as we think about the releases out of Flaming Gorge? That factors in as well, doesn't it?
Kathleen, I think you're talking about the releases that may occur under the Drought Response Operations Agreement signed by the Upper Basin states and the Bureau. And that, you know, right now, I think they're predicting a 10% chance of that agreement needing to kick in 2022. So there are discussions about increased releases or movement of water down from Flaming Gorge into Powell. It's still a pretty low probability that that's going to happen. Doesn't mean it won't happen shortly thereafter, but it is. I think it is something that has the potential to impact, frankly, the endangered fish recovery as well as landowners and recreation below the Flaming Gorge Dam. So it is something that ought to holistically be addressed at the same time as these seasonal operations that T-Wright and these guys are talking about. So.
Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So T. Wright and crew, I heard we had this discussion back in 2018 with the roundtable, and I'm really supportive of you guys. We're kind of I'm still struggling with what the problem is. The problem seems to be the flash flood flows that they're doing with the recovery program. So again, short of the hydrology aspect, and then matching the hydrology with the fish thing. So yeah, I don't know. It seems to me when we had this discussion in 2018, we should be able to get to a place that, we're not sacrificing one objective for the achievement of another objective. And I'm very sympathetic. So anyhow, we want to help. And I think Andy's got the right method. We'll figure out, see what staff can do, and we can have further conversations and be a supportive player with it as well too, right? And Scott. So good to see you, Scott.
Thanks, Doug.
Perfect. Thank you, T. Wright. We really, really appreciate you bringing this to us, and thank you for your time today. And Jack and Scott, we appreciate your time. And Tom Chart, thank you for staying on with us for this presentation. So thank you. And then Andy, if you want to tee up the discussion about the project funding program.
Right. I think if it's all right with the board, I'd like to move on to the project funding program. I think that we do, for one of those proposals, I think we have some folks on the line. So I think, again, out of courtesy to the visitors, I'd love to go ahead and move into that discussion. With that, one of the things I was going to do is introduce one of our new employees, Amy Moyer. I think many of you know Amy from her time at the CWCB and the Department of Natural Resources. I think I've mentioned to you on one of our special meetings that we had the pleasure of hiring Amy. She's now fully on board, even if it is virtually at the moment. She's really a pleasure to work with and a huge asset for the district. She and I will be presenting on this. She's going to take the lead. And Amy, welcome. This is our board. I'm glad to see it didn't scare you away. Why don't you take it away, if you will, Amy.
Well, thanks, Andy. Good afternoon, board. Amy Moyer for the record. I will be presenting, and I have a few slides that, let me see if I'm able to share myself. I think I just need to wait to get co-host privileges.
Yeah.
But while we get going, I will try and be efficient with your time to get back on schedule. We have 3 action items to walk through: approving the PPFP contract template, and then 2 grants that are over $50,000. So looks like I can share. And you should now be seeing the slides. Great.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, again, these are the items that we'll move through, the action items I just mentioned. I will be brief with some of the program updates and approvals that we've made under general manager authority and some of the equity charts. Those are all in your board packet, but we can certainly answer questions that you have. So I will go ahead and move to the approval of the PPFP funding agreement template. This will be our standard program contract for these awardees. It is up for board action and adoption. It includes some of our standard disbursement schedules, standard insurance minimums, and Jason Turner is also available to answer questions of the board. So I will pause here so that we can answer questions. And again, staff recommends approval of the PPFP funding agreement template.
Okay. Anyone have questions? Steve Aquafresca, Director Aquafresca, go ahead.
Thank you. Amy, I walked through this template yesterday, and something that crossed my mind is in regards to applicants for very modest amounts of money, such as individual ranchers or individual farms. Do you believe that they can easily meet the insurance requirements? And will those insurance requirements be the same for a small applicant?
Andy, it looks like you might want to take this
Yeah,
one.
I can take that. Steve, our insurance requirements are always a challenge. If you'll recall, we increased our insurance to the 2 million amount with board authorization due to some increased liability under the Colorado Immunity Act or Governmental Immunity Act. What we do is with prior approval or direction from the board on this, there are applicants that present low risk projects that have trouble meeting the insurance, and it's really the risk to the district that drives whether or not we require the full 2 million policy. That seems to be the one, by the way, that really causes the greatest consternation for any of our contracting parties. So we, on a case-by-case basis, do analyze that, and legal department will make a recommendation, which according to our policy allows, they may recommend against it, may point out that we're have some exposure, but with the delegation of authority that you've delegated to me, I can waive that amount if need be on some of these smaller, less risky projects, and we can accept reduced amounts. We do that currently under certain types of contracts that we enter into anyway. But that is a firm recommendation by legal counsel to have that in there at those levels. But we do try to work with folks.
Good. So it's flexible. I like that.
Yeah.
And I'll just add, we do work with our applicants during every step of the process, from pre-application to award letter process on these insurance requirements, so that we can understand the individual needs of these project applicants early on in this process.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? I'm with the sharing, it's hard for me to see. Doesn't sound like it. So we have a recommendation from staff to approve the PPFP, the partnership project funding project template that would be signed by recipients of our funding. Is there a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
I would move to adopt staff recommendation aqua fresca.
Motion by aqua fresca. Second? Winery? Alvey, sorry. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. That passes. Okay, so we've approved the template, and now you have 2 funding approvals for us to review.
Great, absolutely. And I will run through these program updates very briefly. Again, our program is operational. We have the application materials on our website. We're accepting applications, as you'll see, with the 2 proposals for your approval and the funding that we've also already approved. We are working through our internal processes to fine tune this process. I do just want to, on the record, thank Brendan Longenheisen on our staff. He, before I joined the River District team, has done a lot of work working with our recently awarded applicants on their proposals and getting them to the state of coming to you today. So thank you, Brendan. And I do briefly want to mention that we're working on some branding materials, some more external facing documents that the board can use as you talk with applicants. We should have more to share in July, but I'm excited about the progress we're making there. And then in terms of outreach opportunities, we're really working hard to market this program to both potential applicants, but also other funding opportunities that we can match our funding, leverage our funding with. And so working closely with Zane and our external affairs team on understanding what might be coming down from a stimulus funding perspective, and knowing how we can work with West Slope communities to capture some of those funding dollars and use our program as a good leverage opportunity. But moving right into our first board action item for the Fish Creek #2 repair, Fish Creek Reservoir #2 repair and conservation project. Again, this is a $154,000 request from the Cimarron Canal and Reservoir Company. Since it's above the $50,000 approval threshold, this is up for action today for the board. It is a dam repair project where the project proponent will repair the dam and outlet works on Fish Creek Reservoir #2. There's also a restoration component of this, and TU is a project partner to restore the productive trout fishery and develop a conservation plan that's led by TU to better understand how implementing the new storage will allow for opportunities for releases for environmental opportunities. You'll see there are a number of partners and supporters for this project: the Boswick Park Water Conservancy District, the Montrose County Board of County Commissioners, Gunnison Board of County Commissioners, our own Director Curry and Director Catlin, Gunnison River Basin Roundtable, National Audubon Society, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, City of Montrose, and Trout Unlimited. You'll also see that this project hits a number of our, all 5 of our project categories. And so as we seek to fund projects that are multi-purpose, multi-benefit, this project checks a lot of boxes. Again, it will reclaim new storage. The reservoir is currently under a 0 storage restriction by the state dam safety. And so, you know, alluding to just some of our earlier conversations of the importance of storage, this is a project that will allow additional high mountain storage with pre-compact storage water rights. So I'm really excited to bring this project to you all today. I do want to pause that we have some of the project proponents on the line here if there are any questions from the board. So we have Alan Distel with the board president of the Cimarron Canal and Reservoir Company. We have Nick Emmendorfer and Luke Gingrich of JUB Engineers, and then Carrie Dennison with TU that are on the line. Thank you all for being here and can help answer any questions. So before we move to staff recommendation, I will pause to answer questions from the board.
Are there any questions? And again, with the sharing, I can't see, so speak up.
Hi, I just have an easy question. What is I know it's in Gunnison County, but what's the geographic location of Fish Creek?
Sure, so it's in the headwaters of the Cimarron watershed. It's northwest of Silverjack Reservoir, but I will pause in case our project proponents want to give some more specific directions. It's also in the G-Mug National Forest.
Great, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, this is Monger. If I could, just a quick question. Sure. And again, so Amy, welcome aboard and good to see you. So I guess this looks like a great project, I guess. So and again, I'm always a devil in the details and kind of like to see how, and I love seeing things getting built and projects and the rest. So are we going to have some type of a program, and as we're moving forward here, and we said this was going to be kind of a reactive grant program. We will be making modifications and the rest. I'm get to the point here. So I'd like to see a little bit more of the specifics of it. I don't need to waste our time during our day with JUB and Luke and the rest, but I'd sure like to see some of this, you know, and I've done a project of my own, and I kind of like to see how things are working as we move forward with our grant program as well. So, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to burden this down today, but I'd sure like to see some more information on it. If we have a shared drive or something like that, that we can see them things and we can pull them up at our leisure, that would be great.
Yeah, I concur. I'd love to see the application materials too, and a map, just so we could dig in a little further if we wanted to.
Sure, that's absolutely great feedback. And I think as we go forward, we can provide those materials.
Amy, this is Carrie Dennison with TU. I'd like to take a crack at answering Kathy Chandler's question about exactly where this project is. As you mentioned, it is in the Gunnison National Forest. It's in Gunnison County. It flows into Montrose County. And the Cimarron River flows through a state park. I'm sorry, a state wildlife area, then back into private land through BLM land, and then into the Gunnison River system into Crystal Reservoir, the lower section of the Aspinall unit. And Fish Creek is a small tributary to the Cimarron, to the big Cimarron River. And it actually runs right into the Cimarron Canal right now. So the Cimarron Canal sweeps the creek before it can reach the Cimarron River. And so this is an important project to better manage those flows. It's all kind of a part of a bigger system that we're working on right now.
Great, thank you for that detail.
Thank you, Carrie. Anyone else have questions for Amy or for any of the project proponents? I'm not seeing any.
So this is Munger again, real quick,
Sure.
Madam Chair. So again, as we move forward on these, I guess I'm interested as a board member. I'm interested to know how we got to a zero storage capacity on this thing, and then whether there's going to be, as we're looking through, there's going to be some continued obligation or responsibility for keeping this thing in after we rebuild it, so there's going to be continued to be maintained as well. So I think that's something that we need to keep our eyes out on as we move forward with the grant program. Thank you.
It's a very good point, Doug, because if there are continuing obligations, the board needs to be aware of those so we can factor that into the decision making. Amy, can you answer that question on this project?
Sure. So I believe the storage restriction was put in place in 2017. There are additional phases to this project that the project applicant will be working with additional partners for funding, but I may pause there and see if Alan or others on the project team would like to more directly answer that question.
Yeah, Amy, this is Alan Ditzel. And in response to the question in there, this is an outlet repair. There's nothing wrong with the dam structure itself. There's a small, I don't want to call it a leak, but dam safety is concerned that the outlet pipe has rusted in two alongside of the outlet. And this project will put a soil filter on the outlet. And the Boston Park Water Conservancy District spent close to $100,000 last summer putting in liners wherever the main dam was leaking. This was an engineered project, and Nick, if you want to cover more than what I just said, why, feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So yes, this project was identified or came to be, the zero storage restriction came to be from an inspection by dam safety in 2017. It is due to the zero storage restriction is due to seepage along the outlet conduit. There were a number of other issues that were identified, not resulting in the zero storage restriction. However, this project does capture those. For example, they wanted monitoring across the embankment for, piezometric surface, as we call it. So we are installing monitoring wells. There's a few other pieces like that, like Alan said, the soil filter that we're putting in that go kind of above and beyond what the zero storage restriction did to kind of tackle some of those other issues that were identified, in the hopes that, there would be no work required for some time. Obviously, any dam that's built is going to require upkeep, and is going to have to stay within the requirements of Colorado dam safety. And this is a significant hazard dam, and that was another piece that kind of brought it into the kind of brought it forward as a zero storage restriction. If it was a low hazard dam, it probably would have been able to pass. But recent development downstream caused it to be reclassified as significant hazard. And that's another reason why that zero storage restriction came to be.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
If I can just be really clear about it, I mean, one of the things that I think appealed to staff in terms of this recommendation is that the zero storage restriction has only been on the dam for a short period of time. The applicants have been proactive in getting a design and repair designed and implemented. This is, as I said, one phase of a project that they've done other phases on. We felt that from the district's perspective, we do not have any ongoing obligations on this project, and frankly, on any other project that we're sponsoring through this partnership funding program. Is there an ongoing obligation on the Cimarron Canal Company? Absolutely. That's and it seems to us that they have frankly, the expertise and knowledge and staff to make sure that they meet those needs in the future. So we were not concerned about that, but I think it's a good question, Director Monger, to ask, and I just want to make sure you understand that we did look at those issues and understand them.
Thank you very much, Andy. And Amy, again, thank you for your work on this, and welcome aboard. On behalf of the entire board, we're grateful to have you. And I think staff has now heard that directors would like to see a little bit more of the background information in future packets, but be that as it may, is there a motion on this staff recommendation?
This is Monger. I move that we approve staff recommendation and approve the $154,134 out of the project funding program account.
Thank you, Director Monger. Is there a second? I'm sorry, who seconded?
Winery.
Thank you, Winery. Director Winery. Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of staff recommendation and granting $154,134 from our project funding program for Fish Creek Reservoir #2 repair and conservation project, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, this is approved. Thank you very much. And there's one other one that you need to walk us through, I believe, Amy.
Yes, absolutely. And Andy and I will be tag teaming this. So we've heard a little bit about this project earlier today, the 2021 Yampa River Flow Pilot Project. And Andy, I will turn it over to you to walk through this.
Great, thank you, Amy. And so, board, I want to point out that this request actually is within the discretionary amount that you provided in January for the general manager under this new program. But we talked about it internally at staff, and this is one in which we believe this project, this whole partnership project fund allows us as staff and as the district to be proactive in accomplishing our district's mission. And so if we feel like in staff, if we're really the primary proponent of a project, it's probably not appropriate for me to approve something that I'm the proponent of. And I want to bring it to the board, even if it's under $50,000 or under, because we want to make sure that the board is on board with our expenditure of public funds. This one in particular, as we talked about, the Yampa's has experienced really historic low flows. We think that with climate change, it is likely to experience that going into the future. It's climate change. It's also growth in all parts of the Yampa Basin that are impacting it. And we really see this as an opportunity to help solve a long-term water shortage problem and a water supply issue by really helping the local community understand the extent of the issue as well as the timing of the issue, so that we can then design solutions such as the blanket augmentation plan we discussed, or some form of historic user pool. We see opportunities out there as some of the stored water that has historically been utilized to make electric power through thermal generation may be freed up. And so there are questions about how we can help the community figure out solutions to their long-term problem up there. In order to do that, we've got to know what's going on the ground. We've got to know how much water is likely to help, what the hydrologic circumstances are that are causing this, what the impacts are with respect to the way the calls might ricochet up the river. And we really think it's an exciting opportunity. We've put together a partnership with Tri-State Generation and Transmission, the Yampa River Fund, the Colorado Water Trust, the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, and we'll be reaching out more and more and broadening that circle of water users up there as we go. But really, it's an opportunity, I think, an exciting one for this district to step in and really lead in the creation of a solution for the Yampa Basin as we experience these hotter, drier years. And so with that, what we're recommending is a fund from the partnership project funding program of up to $50,000 to purchase or lease from our enterprise fund in Elkhead up to 1,500 acre feet of water for this purpose this year. As I think is evident in the description in the memo, the Colorado Water Trust is looking at contributing another $107,300. That money is in large part coming from the Yampa River Fund, and that final decision has not been made. I'm aware that it's most likely being looked at as a very favorable application, but just please understand that's not a firm commitment at this point. That's $90,000 from the Yampa River Fund, their balance from an anonymous private donor in the Yampa Basin. We're talking about the additional funds that have come in from the Upper Yampa Conservancy District and Tri-State to help us with the study, but we're asking for a funding of up to $50,000 in this request. If the board has questions of either Amy or I, we'd certainly welcome them.
Okay, does anyone have a question? It looks like Director Aquafresca has his hand raised.
Thank you. Is this a one-time request to help the Yampa water community get through this transition period? Or is there a risk that this could be an annual request and contribution?
It's an excellent question, Director Aquafresca. We've been really clear with the folks we've talked to in the Yampa that this is part of a pilot project, a study that will help us quantify the needs up there and the timing of the water, so that those longer term solutions that are the blanket augmentation plan and or a historic user pool could be created. It is certainly not our intent to fund anything in an ongoing fashion on a regular annual basis through the partnership funding program. So we really have been very clear that this is a pilot project designed to help us develop data, understand the situation. Will it, I will just tell you, is it 1 year or may we find ourselves in a couple future years trying to tweak and understand this a little bit more? We might. Now, does that mean that our project program is going to be the main source of funds for that? Probably not. But it is our effort to try to figure out for those water users up in the Yampa a permanent solution. And I think in order to do that, we've got to be able to show that reservoir water actually can help them. And frankly, there's a little bit of self-interest here in showing that developing a market for our stored water is a really good idea for our enterprise, and helping people understand how it can be beneficial to their community and their water users is pretty critical for us. If you'll remember, our total lease for consumptive uses up in the Yampa to date have been approximately 1 acre-foot out of Elkhead. And so we're excited about anything we can do, and you might want to look at this as perhaps a lost leader in the marketing world, if you would, to try to help us demonstrate the usefulness of this water. So,
if the pilot project does extend into a second or even a third year, you believe this $50,000 can be stretched out to get those tasks done?
You know, Director Akafriska, I will tell you, it's not clear that how much water we're going to need. That's part of why we're doing the pilot project, is that the amount of water needed to keep water users in priority is an unknown number up there in the Yampa. So we want to see what this 1,500 acre feet will do this year, up to 1,500 acre feet. It is possible that we'll use it all this year. It's possible that we'll have half or more of it available if in fact, I mean, let's just realize that it could in fact turn into a wet August against all predictions. And we could have a full monsoonal season, which would lessen the impacts of, lessen the need for a call and decrease the need for us to release any water. So it's really a bit of an unknown at this point.
Andy, I also assume that as a long-term solution is developed, whatever project that looks like, we're not approving that today. Any future project, any long-term solution in which the district would have a role would come back before this board in sometime in the future.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, other questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Monger again. So I guess, Andy, I apologize, I should know this. So are the $171,000, is that actually going to go? Are we going to, and who's going to be the team leader of that? Is the River District going to be the team leader? And are we going to go out for an RFP for outside engineers to do that? Or is that some of our in-kind, or again,
Yeah, so Doug, we've already retained Wilson Water Group to do some engineering modeling. Your district and ours have done that. But in terms of these releases and the timing of the releases, largely will be dictated by the hydrograph, by Don Meyer's work and predicting what's going to happen out there, working closely, hopefully, with the division engineer to keep the call off the river. So it's a proactive effort. And the Colorado Water Trust, I would say that it's a good coalition of folks with the Water Trust and Tri-State and the Upper Yampa. So it really will be a coordinated effort, Doug, but one that is kind of a as you go through the year, it will change potentially quickly. But we're not talking about paying for engineering. This $171,000, with the exception of the $14,000 that's being paid to Wilson Water Group, is actually being paid for wet water releases out of reservoirs either owned by Upper Yampa or by our district. And so that's really the key there. And President Whitmore, I know that you can't maybe see the hands that are raised, but Director Alvey, Director Vandenbrink, and Director Chandler Henry all have their hands raised.
Yeah, thank you. For whatever reason, because it's on shared screen, I see one speaker and that's it.
If you move the shared screen, there's a line between the little images and the screen. If you move it to the left on your screen, you can grab the bar in the middle of the screen and move it to the left. And that way you get to see more boxes.
If it's helpful to do, I can
there
stop
we go.
There.
Yeah, why don't we there we go. Thank you. Okay, so Director Alvey.
Just a real quick question. I'm assuming that Director Gray is supportive, although he's not listed. It's important that the director from the county is involved and supportive.
Director Gray is very supportive. Only because he's not here, I might even say he's rather pushy about it.
put that on the list of supporters. Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Chandler Henry.
Yeah, let's see, yeah, thank you. I had a similar question to Director Mongers, just wondering where the money is going and a suggestion that in the future, you've shown us the revenue and the matching. If you could show us the summary of the expenditures too, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Director Vandenbrink.
Thank you. And I may have overlooked it, but it seems like we're only looking at doing the Moffett County piece of the Yampa River. Is there an advantage to us? Maybe, I mean, when they put the Yampa on administration, it's the whole Yampa River down to the Green, or to the Snake River, excuse me. Is there any advantage to us moving up into Routt County and seeing how that reacts? I know you've got a proposal in front of us, but it seems like we should be looking at this river in a more holistic approach rather than just in Moffett County. Or is there something more critical with that Moffett County piece that I don't understand?
No, I would say, Director Vandenbrink, I think you raise a really good point, one that Director Gray and I chatted about. Our water releases are being done from Elkhead Reservoir, which is primarily located in Moffett County, and will provide water downstream to those water users and downstream of it, which is why we focused on Moffett County. Oddly enough, Director Gray suggested that perhaps we allocate some percentage of this project benefit to Routt County, because it will also, if we're successful in keeping the call off the river, the water users in Routt County too will benefit. Our modeling and study that's going on does cover both Moffett and Routt County. That's why the Upper Yampa Conservancy District is participating in the funding of that study. So with that being said, I think my recommendation was to allocate 100% of those funds to Moffett County. I think that it would be fair to do something closer to a 70-30 split with Moffett and Routt, but because of the benefit, we'll extend that way. Now, Mr. Monger may have some thoughts about that, but you know, it's a bit subjective, to be quite honest, as many of these allocations are.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'm not seeing anyone. Would anyone like to make a motion on staff's recommendation?
Move staff recommendation, Alvy.
Alvy is moved, second from Director Hawes. Any further discussion? All those in favor of this motion, which would be to approve the Yampa River proposed 2021 pilot project in an amount not to exceed $50,000, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you very much, Amy. Appreciate your work on this. And thank you, Andy. And did you want to go, and you want to go through the general manager's project approvals?
Sure, I will just briefly touch on these, and I think you can see my screen again, and wanted to just show a chart of 5 projects that we've approved under the general manager threshold. I do just want to point out the multiple benefit, multi-purpose nature of these projects. As you can see, they hit multiple categories. We've been able to fund everything from post-fire, modernizing infrastructure, supporting our agriculture, water rights. So I think we're starting to see the benefit of this program and how we're filling some funding gaps, being nimble. We're a flexible rolling application program, and we're able to get some money out the door to these really good projects. In terms of total funding amount under general manager threshold, we've funded about $195,000, but I want to point out just the amount of cash match that we're leveraging, over 1.2 million. And so while we don't have a defined cash match requirement, we are emphasizing that we want to leverage these dollars, we want to stretch them, we want to see them go farther. And so I just want to point that number out to the board, and it's great to see that high of a leverage that we've been able to secure. You do have descriptions of these projects in your board packet, and we are updating our project map website so that the public and others can learn more about these projects. We can showcase where we're funding. Certainly open to feedback. I appreciate the feedback we've received so far today on how we can better demonstrate what we're funding, the information that's helpful to you all. So please feel free to pass that along to me as we get going. This project is early on, so we want to make sure we're providing the right level of detail to you all. And then just briefly, I'll turn to our equity charts. You will start seeing these at every board meeting. We'll continue to keep you updated on the equity principles that are in the funding framework that you all approved in January. As you'll see, these equity charts, again, we're early on. And if you'll remember, the Windy Gap Bypass project is $1 million in Grand County. And so as you look at these pie charts, just know that that's a large portion of these at this point. But again, we're early on. And so if you look back at this table here, you can see just how we're funding across different counties. We're hitting a lot of categories. And so certainly staff have these equity targets at the top of our mind as we're working with applications, working with potential project applicants into the future. I'm excited that we've already funded 7 out of our 15 counties. That's great. And we'll continue to, again, work through these equity targets, show you these distributions at every board meeting and answer any questions that you might have. So I'll pause there and just want to thank the board again. Thank you for bearing with me today as we get this off the ground, and it's exciting. So I appreciate just joining the team, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this funding program.
Thank you very much, Amy. Andy, maybe we could go back and pick up 1 or 2 items from your report before we break.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. We're going to bring Mike Eitel back on. And I just want to say we're going to just initially ask if the board have any questions about Regulation 93 and the 303D list memo that Mike prepared. The memo itself is self-explanatory, but if there are questions, we'll certainly take those.
Questions on the 303D list?
The only thing I'd add on that one, folks, is it's directly tied to what you guys just spent a good day of the afternoon talking about, the endangered fish. The selenium listing is really targeted at that aquatic life organism. So this is a good thing. Means a lot of the work on the ground is causing good effects on the river. So that's why I'd leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, Andy, pick whichever one you want to do.
Well, we'll turn it right over to Mike to get the 2 proposals, contract approvals discussed and see how you want to treat them. Upper Colorado River Wild and Scenic Alternative Management Plan. Mike, you want to give a small background on each?
Yep. Good afternoon again, folks. Thanks for having me here. I think these will fit nicely in before the end of the day. We can all thank Director Hawes for the Wild and Scenic. Taylor and I were members of the first meeting in the town of Kremling's Chamber of Commerce in a packed room back in 2007. But the Wild and Scenic Stakeholder Group, these 2 authorizations are for that stakeholder group. One is for the River District and the other one is for the stakeholder group as itself. The RRC contract, I'm looking for authorization for $54,500 for RRC Associates to conduct the recreational surveys on the Colorado River for the Wild and Scenic Stakeholder Group. This is funded through a purchase order through the CWCB, which the board have approved us to be fiscal agent in June of 2020 for this. Due to the size of the contract, we have to bring it to you for authorization. And I'll leave it at that.
But just the key part there is that this is not actually our money, it's CWCB money.
This is pass-through money. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification, Andy. Would anyone like to move staff recommendation on the contract with RCC Associates?
I'll move staff. I'll second.
Great. Chandler Henry moves. Director Hawes seconds. And does anyone have any additional questions about this or any other discussion about this? And again, Andy has clarified CWCB money. Okay, if not, all those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Great, that one's done.
Thank you, directors. The second one is that other wild and scenic request. This one is for River District funding. Bishop Brogden Associates has been a longtime consultant for the River District, and they represent Middle Park Water Conservancy District also as their primary engineer. This is a cost share type of arrangement that we've been doing in the past with them. Bishop Brogden offers us technical assistance to the West Slope Water Users Interest Group. And there's a lot of different technical aspects that come up with flows, hydrology, geomorphology, and things like that. Currently, this is going to be spent on a channel monitoring program that we're working on. And Christina Wynn is the primary contract entity for BBA project manager that works for us directly. We're looking to split this funds. It'll be not to exceed $28,500 for our portion of this. The other portion comes from Middle Park. We do not sign an arrangement. It's more of a handshake between the two agencies. So I would look for authorization for this, if you would, please.
Any questions? Does anyone have a motion on staff recommendation?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Ely. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of staff recommendation to award a contract with Bishop Brogden Associates related to the Wild and Scenic Alternative Management Plan, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay.
Thank
Great.
you. No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Mike, very
Andy,
much.
thank you, Mike. Andy, I will leave it to you as to whether there are, one or two additional things you want to tackle today, or you'd prefer to recess until tomorrow.
I think we can handle at least one of these items right now pretty quickly.
Perfect.
Audrey Turner could come on as our chief of operations. She wrote I think an excellent memo on the triennial salary survey process update. I do recognize that we have some new directors who may not be familiar with our process on our salary surveys that we do. I think Audrey did a good job explaining it, but we're not actually looking for action by the board, just questions and feedback. Audrey, is there anything you feel like you need to add, or do you want to just take questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the memo is probably the best way to get all of the information, and happy to address any questions you have with the goal of presenting the report to the board at the October quarterly meeting.
Perfect. Questions for Audrey on her memo? Does everybody understand this salary survey? We do it every 3 years.
Every 3 years, yep.
Okay.
So this is Monger,
Sure.
Audrey. So how did we select Mountain States? Is that who, Employers Council?
So that was, they did the 2018 salary survey. I am not inclined to consider them for the 2021 survey. And the primary reason was because they had two different departments who conducted the study, the surveys department and then the compensation expert. And there was a big disconnect between the two. And so I would propose, and we will do an RFP and hopefully get multiple consultants who are interested, but in working with one main project manager to conduct the entire study.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Other questions or comments? All right, sounds like move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I do want to just tackle one last item.
Sure.
That's okay. The proposed procurement policy. Ian Phillips is going to join us. As his memo states, this is will apply only when we're utilizing federal funds, grant funds that we have in the past several years been successful at acquiring. We've gotten some pushback from federal agencies and potentially our auditors about not having a procurement policy that complies with federal guidelines. I just want to apologize on Ian's behalf for being so wordy in the policy and procurement policy. It is what it is in order to comply with federal regulations. Ian, anything you want to hit on?
No, thanks. I mean, I can touch briefly and just mention that we've got 3 federal awards currently. The RCBP is the big award. And then we have another supplemental grant from the NRCS and the Water Smart grant from the Bureau as well. So those are the 3 federal awards we currently have. Any questions about this?
I just appreciate the fact that we are distinguishing our procurement into federal and all others. I've reviewed enough federal grant agreements with many strings attached that sometimes people don't realize how many strings are attached and what kinds of problems that can cause. And so I think it looks like a good way of handling it, and that form won't apply to anything else.
Right.
Any other questions or concerns on the procurement? Okay. Looks like we're fine with that as well.
Okay. Excellent. And so I guess we would need a motion to approve staff recommendations.
Sorry, you're right.
Yep.
My bad. Do we have a motion to a motion for staff recommendation?
So moved, Albie.
Thank you, Director Alvey. Second.
Beckley.
Thank you, Director Beckley. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the procurement policy for federal projects. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Done.
All right, I have one last item I want to cover slightly out of order in the general manager's report, just because I noticed that former Garfield director David Merritt is on the call today and may not be able to make it tomorrow. I haven't talked to him, but I just, since he's here, let's get it done.
You bet.
As it's indicated in the memo, the Kobe Water Authority is an agreement, an authority set up between ourselves and the Bluestone Water Conservancy District. The River District traditionally has 2 members on that board of the Water Authority. They have historically been both Garfield and Mesa County directors to the board of the River District. The bylaws don't require that they be our current directors, nor do they require that they come from Garfield or Mesa County. It's just that the project straddles those 2 counties, and that's, I think, why this board has that tradition. We're in the process of increasing the capacity at the Bluestone Water Conservancy District so that they can handle this project, or the authority can handle this project more on its own without River District staff. We had, unlike any other Conservancy District project, this one we had been staffing through our own staff, particularly Ray Tenney, Ian Phillips, Lori DePaulo, and Jason Turner. You know, sometimes we found that as much as 12 to 18% of Ray Tenney's time was actually being spent on Kobe. We're getting reimbursed by the Kobe Water Authority, but given the limited size of our staff, it didn't seem to me like an excellent plan. So we're kind of in the process of standing them up on their own, helping them build their internal capacity and letting that launch. With that, we thought that someone with the experience and history that Dave Merritt has in the project, he was involved as a staff member in creating this project. He was involved as a board member on our board with it. We thought maybe it would be best to let Dave participate on our district's behalf in winding things down. Steve Beckley has graciously indicated his agreement to that suggestion. And with that, we would just ask that you approve staff recommendation to continue Director Merritt's or David Merritt's appointment to the Kobe Water Authority on behalf of the River District.
Yes, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. As the other Kobe board member from the River District, I would say Dave's contribution to the Kobe project has been absolutely instrumental. I'm not certain that we could have completed it as done without Dave's lifetime of experience and his enthusiasm for the project. And we're really fortunate that he wants to agree to continue on with that assignment. So if a motion is appropriate, I would make a motion that Dave Merritt continue to be the second River District board member to the Kobe Water Authority.
Thank you very much. That's a motion by Director Aquafresca. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Beckley.
Thank you very much, Director Beckley. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. David, thank you very much for being willing to do this. And Director Beckley, thank you very much for your graciousness in not wanting that seat yourself. So thank you very much. We appreciate it, your generosity. And Dave, we really appreciate all of your time and hard work. And gosh, you must have a lot of free time on your hands these days.
I just realized Dave, unfortunately, looks like he dropped off. So that was
Bummer.
I will
All
make
right.
sure he has those comments relayed to him, President Whitmore.
All right.
I assure you, he promised me he wanted this. So
no, I know that he did. I know that he did, and I'm grateful that he was willing to do it. So this worked out wonderfully well. Thank you. So perhaps at this point we will recess until tomorrow morning. Let me just point out to everybody, we have some really, really important things to discuss tomorrow. Our annual policy discussion, all of those items are very important. So if you haven't had a chance to look at those in the packet, be sure you've looked at those before tomorrow morning, so that if we do have any revisions or changes, that we can address those. And we do have quite a few other important things tomorrow. So we'll see everyone at 8:30. I wish we were breaking for dinner this evening, but we will in July. So thanks everyone. See you in the morning. Any other parting words, Andy?
Nothing else. I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for your patience with the Zoom.
Good night, all.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks.